Chapter 1924. The chaos caused by Ri Zhao's disciple quickly subsided. There were many casualties in Renyuan Valley, and the entire Yunluo Holy Land began to investigate. Lu Yi was sent back to Zhai Xinglu, and Sun Yinyue arranged more guards to protect him in secret. Obviously, the incident just now had shocked her. She also knew that once Lu Ye's name spread, it would attract the attention of God's disciples. In fact, she had already prepared for it, but she never thought that it would be Ri Zhao's disciple himself. This time, if it wasn't for Achidwa suddenly taking out a powerful defensive treasure, her junior brother really didn't know if he would be able to survive. There was no need for Lu Yi to deal with the aftermath outside. In Zhai Xinglu, he frowned and pondered. Abdullah sat quietly on the side, recuperating. As expected of a barbarian from the ancient barbarian world, his physique was strong. After taking a hit from Ri Zhao, other than being a little embarrassed, he was actually fine. Time passed, and Abdullah finally recovered. He took a deep breath and saw Lu Yi standing not far away. He frowned and said, "What are you thinking about?" Lu Yi said, "Something is wrong." "What do you mean?" Abdullah asked. "Think about it. The battlefield here in this world is under the command of Ri Zhao. According to the information we have now, Tianhong's strength is stronger than the opponent. He has killed the opponent several times, but because the opponent is a disciple of God, there is no way to really kill him. But since Tianhong has been watching the opponent, how did he infiltrate the final world without anyone noticing? It was normal for an ordinary God's disciple to infiltrate, but it couldn't be helped. If Ri Zhao infiltrated and no one knew, how weak could the defense line of the final world be?" Abdullah rolled his eyes. "Don't tell me you think Tianhong." Lu Yi shook his head. "No, if there is a problem with Tianhong, then we will definitely die. Previously, it was Tianhong who came to save the situation at the critical moment, so Tianhong shouldn't have a problem. I'm just wondering why he couldn't guard against Ri Zhao's infiltration. It is indeed a little strange." Abdullah roughly understood Lu Ye's meaning. "Then do you understand?" Lu Yi originally suspected that there was a spy in the final world, but even if there was a spy, as long as Tianhong was careful enough, he wouldn't let him succeed, because he only needed to keep an eye on Ri Zhao's disciple. Unless there was more than one Ri Zhao heavenly god's disciple in the final soul world. But if there was more than one, Tianhong would not have rushed back so quickly. The situation became complicated and confusing. What made Lu Yi feel even more helpless was that he had not made any progress in his research on the disciple of gods these days. He had personally repeated all the attempts he had made in the final soul world, but so far, he still could not figure out the mystery of the disciple of God's resurrection. There didn't seem to be anything special in the body of an enlightened disciple. From the looks of it, he could only use that move. With that thought in mind, Lu Yi said, "Bring an enlightened disciple over." Abro got up and left. Not long after, he came back with a celestial god's disciple in his hand. It was as if he was carrying a noodle. This disciple of celestial God was undoubtedly knocked out by him. The disciples of the enlightened gods were all very manic. They would often use secret techniques similar to the blood explosion technique. Because they were not afraid of death and their Fa-Li was extremely strange, anyone who was affected by their self-explosion would not have a good time. He placed the disciple in front of Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised a finger and tapped the disciple's forehead. Abro stood to the side and watched. Soon, he noticed that there was a surge of divine sense coming from Lu Ye's side. He immediately understood Lu Ye's plan and said in surprise, "You also know the soul-searching technique?" He quickly reminded, "Be careful, Tianhong has done this before, but those disciples of the enlightened gods still blew themselves up. Their divine sea seems to have some kind of restriction placed on it. Once it is searched, it will be triggered." Lu Yi nodded. Of course, he had not cultivated the soul-searching technique, but he had a more convenient method. It was just that he did not want to do it unless it was a last resort, because every time he did it, it would make him feel very uncomfortable. His divine sense surged and easily broke through the divine sea protection of the celestial god's disciple. The divine mark spiritual connection quickly took shape. In the next instant, intermittent scenes rapidly flashed through Lu Ye's mind. These scenes were undoubtedly the experiences of the disciple of gods in front of him. Lu Yi was extremely surprised, because he felt that the celestial god in front of him was most likely the shadow. In that case, he was actually not sure if the divine mark spiritual connection could work. After all, the shadow was just an illusion condensed by the mysterious power of the Azura field. It did not really exist at this stage. Even so, Lu Yi still spied on the shadow's past. In this way, the shadow condensed by the Azura field was far more mysterious than he had imagined. Except for the fact that they would turn into fluorescent light and disappear after killing them, they were no different from living people. Immersing himself in his mind, he carefully examined. Gradually, Lu Yi learned of the other party's origin. He originally thought that the other party was an invader from another galaxy, but it was not until this moment that he realized that the other party was a cultivator from this galaxy, but not from the final realm, but from another realm. He did not know why he had become a disciple of gods. Lu Yi felt that he seemed to have touched on some secret. After a while, he saw some intermittent scenes, which were the scenes of the cultivator fighting with the disciple of gods. The time of this scene was undoubtedly very recent, because this galaxy had been invaded in recent years. Lu Ye's heart was excited. If he could spy on how this cultivator became a disciple of gods, then he would certainly know the secret. Another scene flashed, which was the scene of the star constellation being defeated by the enemy. His whole body was smashed, his breath was weak, and he was about to die. At this moment, he was being carried by a disciple of gods, flying toward a brown star. The scene changed again, and Lu Yi saw a cauldron with a bloody light. The cauldron was huge, and its surface was covered with bloody lines, like thick blood vessels, which made people tremble. A strong smell of blood rushed to his face, and a rhythmic thumping sound came from the cauldron, like a heartbeat. On both sides of the cauldron, there was a strange pattern of bloody flowers. What made Lu Yi amazed was that this bloody cauldron contained an extremely surging and condensed vitality, which was so huge that he had never felt before. At this moment, his view was above the bloody cauldron. Obviously, the star constellation was brought here by the disciple of gods, and then his view quickly fell. He should have been thrown down. Lu Yi held his breath, and he knew that the secret of the birth of the disciple of gods was in front of him. However, at this moment, the bloody light in the huge bloody cauldron suddenly surged, and then a crack appeared. The crack quickly opened and turned into a single eye. Being stared at by the single eye, Lu Ye's mind swayed. A boom came out, and Lu Yi suddenly came back to his senses. He heard Ebo's shout, "Lu Yi!" In front of him, there was no trace of the disciple of gods, only countless pieces of broken bodies. Coupled with the movement and the accompanying impact, Lu Yi immediately understood that the star constellation had exploded. Abdulwo had just reminded him that there was a restriction in the spirit sea of the disciple of gods, which would be triggered once the soul search was performed. Although he did not perform the soul search technique, the effect of one spiritual point was undoubtedly more comprehensive than the soul search technique. He should have accidentally touched the restriction in the disciple of God's spirit sea, which caused the disciple of gods to explode. That sound and the accompanying impact were caused by the self-detonation. Lu Yi was not injured, and the explosion of a star constellation could not do anything to him. However, what made Lu Yi puzzled was that his qi and blood were boiling involuntarily. Somewhere in the distance, it seemed that something was pulling his qi and blood, trying to devour his qi and blood. He could not help but think of the huge blood-colored furnace he had seen just now. The secret of the birth of the disciple of gods was in it, and the thing that was pulling his qi and blood was undoubtedly that strange thing. What was that? What was the blood-colored eye that suddenly appeared at the last moment? He gently took a breath, suppressed the abnormality of his qi and blood, and looked up at the disciple of gods who had exploded. Unsurprisingly, he was going to be resurrected. Sure enough, the pieces of the body that had exploded seemed to be pulled by some force at the moment, gathering in one position and quickly piecing together into the shape of the disciple of gods. Even the scattered blood was like a swallow returning to its nest. Lu Yi suddenly raised his eyebrows, fixed his eyes on the disciple of God's head, and said in surprise, "Brother Abduo, look!" Abdullah followed his gaze and looked. What? This, a blood flower. Lu Yi said again. The blood flower was exactly the same as the one he had seen on the blood-colored furnace. Abdullah looked at it attentively, and then turned to look at Lu Yi with a dignified expression. You can't see it? Lu Yi immediately noticed. I don't see anything, Abdullah said. While the two were talking, something even more bizarre happened. Suddenly, a blood-colored light appeared on the blood flower out of thin air, and there was a wonderful vitality from the blood-colored light into the blood flower. Lu Yi looked at Abdullah again and saw that he was still suspicious. Obviously, he didn't see anything, and he didn't even feel anything unusual. Lu Yi stopped talking and carefully observed. Not long after, the blood-colored light and the blood flower that appeared out of thin air slowly dissipated. The disciple of God's, who should have been dead, suddenly opened his eyes, and his body was full of vitality. He had just been resurrected, so he was still a little confused and didn't understand the current situation. However, after seeing Lu Yi, he immediately moved and rushed over. A big hand directly grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. Abdullah asked, "What do we do now?" "Wait a minute," Lu Yi replied, with a thoughtful look on his face. This time, he used a little spiritual sense and got a lot of useful information. Unfortunately, it was not comprehensive enough. Even so, it made great progress in his study of the disciple of God's. End of chapter. Chapter 1925. First of all, he could confirm that the enlightened disciple was not born naturally, but could be transformed. The experience of the man in front of him was the best evidence. He was a cultivator from another region of the galaxy and had fought with the enlightened disciple. Unfortunately, he was not strong enough and was beaten half to death. The birth of the disciple of the enlightened God must be directly related to the huge blood-red furnace. Lu Yi could not see all the memories of the other party, but he could roughly guess that after the half-dead person was thrown into the blood-red furnace, he was reborn and transformed into the disciple of the enlightened God. Moreover, when the enlightened disciple was revived, there was a blood flower on top of his head and a blood-colored light with vitality poured in, but Abdullah could not see it. Lu Yi could not see it before, but today he saw it. He faintly guessed that it was either related to the blood-colored furnace he saw from the enlightened disciple's memories, or it was related to the enlightened disciple. After this divine pattern was used, he explored the enlightened disciple's memories, so he was able to see the mystery. But in any case, this was not a bad thing. At least, there was substantial progress in the study of the resurrection of the enlightened disciple. He had roughly understood the mystery of the resurrection of the enlightened disciple. He was a little puzzled before. How could there be so much vitality in the enlightened disciple's body? Now it seemed that the enlightened disciple's body did not have so much vitality. Their resurrection vitality came from the blood-colored light and the blood flower. And the source must be the huge blood-colored furnace. At this point, Lu Ye's eyes lit up. If he could destroy the blood-colored furnace, wouldn't he be able to solve the problem from the source? Once the blood-colored furnace was lost, the enlightened disciple would no longer have the ability to resurrect, because they had no vitality to use. The brown star. The blood-colored furnace was hidden somewhere in the brown star. Lu Yi quickly took out a jade slip and imprinted a lot of information on the jade slip, including the appearance of the blood-colored furnace and the brown star. Then he looked at Abdullah and handed him the jade slip. Go and give this to Tianhong, and ask him to find a way to pass it to the Galactic Coalition Army. Abdullah's face suddenly became bitter. I only have 50% of my battle merits left. Last time Lu Yi asked him to catch a few enlightened disciples, he was severely taught a lesson by Tianhong, and his battle merits were reduced by 50%. This time, not only would he lose his battle merits, but Tianhong would also punish him for dereliction of duty. Don't worry, this is a serious matter. Tianhong will not punish you. Go and come back quickly, no problem. Don't lie to me. Abdo was suspicious, but Lu Ye's tone was solemn. He also sensed the importance of this information. He did not feel at ease leaving it to others, so he had to make the trip himself. As he spoke, he picked up the jade slip and threw away the divine disciple who had been knocked unconscious by him. After a while, Abdullah left. Lu Yi looked at the disciple of the God of Heaven in front of him. He raised his hand and waved it gently. The disciple of the God of Heaven was immediately killed on the spot. The enlightened Lu Yi, Lu Yi, the enlightened disciples, the enlightened Lus, the enlightened Lu. Destroyed enlightened disciples be destroyed if it was possible. The enlightened disciple would not be able to recover if there was no new life force injected into his body. Lu Yi started to do something, but what surprised him was that although he could see the enlightened disciples, Lu Yi could not touch it no matter what he did. The enlightened disciples' recovery could not be stopped at all. After a while, the enlightened disciples' life force rose again. But this time, he was killed by Lu Yi as soon as he opened his eyes. The next few attempts were to no avail. Seeing that the enlightened disciple was about to recover, Lu Yi suddenly thought that since the life force was injected through space, if he could isolate the enlightened disciple, would he be able to prevent his recovery? With this in mind, Lu Yi immediately began to set up a formation to isolate the enlightened disciple. The formation flag was set up, and soon a formation was set up. The next moment, Lu Yi looked excited, because in the formation, the enlightened disciple, who should have recovered quickly, seemed to be hindered by something, and his injuries were no longer recovering. He looked carefully. The enlightened disciple's head was still blooming, but there was no bloody light. After a while, the enlightened disciple's head gradually shrank and slowly disappeared. Almost at the same time, the enlightened disciple's body turned into a little fluorescent light and dissipated. It worked. Lu Yi was overjoyed. This isolation was really effective, and it was extremely significant. A figure flashed in front of him, and it was Abdullah who came back, looking excited. "What information did you send?" After Tianhong saw it, she was very happy and gave us a reward on the spot, giving us a lot of battle merits. The battle merits were naturally useless to the two of them, but in the settlement after the end of the experience, the battle merits could be converted into Shura seal rewards. "Bring another enlightened disciple over." Lu Yi did not answer him, but ordered. Abdullah did not stand still, turned around and left. Next, Lu Yi tried another enlightened disciple, setting up a formation to isolate him. After killing him, after a while, he turned into fluorescent light and disappeared. Abdullah's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What kind of logic is this? Lu Yi told him about his previous discovery, and Abdullah's eyes lit up, and he praised, "I admire you people with brains. This information must be worth a lot of battle merits. I have to send it to Tianhong quickly." "Don't worry." Lu Yi waved his hand. "I have other directions to try." The most important thing was that Lu Yi still wanted to spy on the secret of the bloody furnace. One by one, the enlightened disciples were brought over by Abdullah, and Lu Yi frequently used a little bit of spiritual sense. Although the process was painful, in order to find out the secret of the bloody furnace, he could only endure it. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he did not make much progress. Every time he was about to use up his power, the bloody eye would suddenly appear, and then the enlightened disciple would explode. This made Lu Yi understand that his spying must have triggered the restriction in the enlightened disciple's spirit sea, and there was no way to avoid it. Unless he personally went to the location of the bloody furnace to investigate, relying on a little bit of spiritual sense could not make much progress. Isolating the enlightened disciples and then killing them was indeed the best way to deal with them. Lu Yi also tried to put the enlightened disciples into his little flower realm, and the effect was the same. Once the door of the little flower realm was closed, the degree of isolation was stronger than the formation. Abdullah had already passed this information to Tianhong, and as expected, he was rewarded again. Lu Yi was not too happy. To deal with the enlightened disciples, this method could be used, but what about Rizhao? Rizhao's battle was so loud. What method could be used to isolate their resurrection? Formation was definitely not possible. No Rizhao would foolishly stay in the same place and let others set up a formation to cover them. When they noticed something was wrong, they would definitely escape. Even if the formation was successfully set up, the ordinary formation could not withstand the impact of the battle between Rizhao and Rizhao. If this problem was not solved, the war against the enlightened disciples would never end. "Senior brother." A crisp voice came out. Lu Yi turned his head and found that it was Aki Duo. "How are your injuries?" Lu Yi asked with concern. If Aki Duo had not desperately protected him before, he would have had to use the red talisman to delay until Tianhong's help. A red talisman was of great value, and it was naturally best not to use it. "It's no problem," Aki Duo replied with a smile, and suddenly her expression turned serious. "By the order of senior sister, from today onwards, I will be senior brother's personal guard." Obviously, Aki Duo's previous performance was recognized by Sun Yinyue, and she was specially transferred over. Lu Yi, however, felt that Sun Yinyue must have misunderstood, because when he handed Aki Duo over, he told Sun Yinyue to tell Aki Duo to come find him after she recovered. But it didn't matter. "Come with me." Lu Yi waved his hand and stepped to the side. Aki Duo did not understand what was going on, and obediently followed. After a short while, Lu Yi and Aki Duo sat opposite each other, and Aki Duo asked curiously, "Senior brother, do you have any orders?" "Stretch out your hand," Lu Yi said. Aki Duo stretched out her hand. Lu Yi raised his hand. "It will be a little uncomfortable, try to bear with it." Aki Duo nodded. Lu Yi closed his eyes and concentrated. In an instant, invisible roots probed into Aki Duo's body from the point of contact. Immediately, Lu Yi activated the power of the talent tree. Aki Duo's face immediately tightened, because at this moment, she clearly felt a burning force in her body, causing her some pain, but she did not make any sound, and her eyes gradually lit up. Lu Yi was checking his talent tree at this moment. A large amount of gray fog rose from the talent tree. This made him frown. It seemed that his previous discovery was not wrong. Aki Duo was injured by Rizhao Shige's disciple and was eroded by his spiritual power. Lu Yi used the talent tree to help her resolve it, but at that time, he found something strange. There was no trace of spiritual power left in Aki Duo's body, but the talent tree still had an abnormal reaction. At that time, Aki Duo's injuries were relatively serious, and Lu Yi could not delay, so he could only let Sun Yinyue treat him first. It was not until today that she fully recovered that Lu Yi had the chance to check again. Just from the feedback of the talent tree, the situation in Aki Duo's body was obviously not good. "Are you poisoned?" Lu Yi opened his eyes and looked at Aki Duo. He saw Aki Duo staring at him excitedly, as if she had discovered something new. Hearing his question, Aki Duo came back to her senses and quickly shook her head. She looked at him blankly, and it didn't seem like she was lying. Lu Yi was also very strange because, judging from the reaction of the talent tree, if Aki Duo was really poisoned, it must be a kind of strong poison, and there was no reason for her to be safe. But if she was not poisoned, what was the reaction of the talent tree? The large amount of gray fog rising and the rapidly consumed fuel reserves all showed that there was a huge problem with Aki Duo's body. End of chapter. Chapter 1926. After careful inspection, there were no signs of poisoning in Akiduo's body, but the tree's reaction wouldn't be wrong. What's going on? Lu Yi frowned and pondered. Slowly, he remembered something. Back then, when he helped the Merfolk clan burn out the power of the curse in their bloodline, the reaction of the talent tree was just as intense. According to the information provided by the Merfolk clan, their ancestors had offended some almighty expert and were poisoned by the bloodline curse, causing them to only be able to survive under the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If it weren't for the chance encounter with Lu Yi, they would probably never see the light of day again. Akiduo wasn't poisoned, her magic power was very pure, and her body was very sturdy. Her current situation was very similar to the Merfolk clan back then. "Is there anyone else in your family?" Lu Yi asked. Akiduo shook her head. "No, just me." This was also a pitiful person. Lu Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Then, did anything happen in your family that you care about? Or do you have any strange similarities?" If there was really something wrong with Akiduo's bloodline, it couldn't be just her alone. Similar problems would appear in the entire family, just like the Merfolk clan back then, but the manifestations were probably different. Lu Yi could roughly confirm it through the tree's reaction, but if he could get more accurate information, it would undoubtedly be confirmed. Akiduo looked at Lu Yi in surprise. "Senior brother, Why do you ask? There really was? Answer me first. Akijuo's expression suddenly became a little gloomy. She sighed and said, Our clansmen don't live long. No matter how high their cultivation is, their lifespan won't increase at all. Lu Yi was stunned. Then how old are you this year? Akijuo reported a number. Lu Yi couldn't help but be amazed. Akijuo wasn't much older than him, but she was already at Yu Yao's cultivation. It was clear that her talent was very strong. Abdullah was originally standing behind Lu Yi, but after hearing Akijuo's words, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. He was the most outstanding barbarian cultivator in the current generation, but compared to Akijuo, it was like comparing heaven and earth. At Akijuo's age, he had just ascended to the constellation realm not long ago. There was actually such a monster in this world? Even if Akido wasn't a cultivator of this era and was only a shadow left behind by a certain era, it was still shocking enough. This meant that at a certain point in time, Akido really did exist. It was confirmed that there was indeed a bloodline curse in Akido's body, but unlike the merfolk, her curse affected her lifespan, so she could only have the lifespan of a mortal. Senior brother, what's wrong with my body? Akido asked. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, There is a strange curse in your bloodline. It is because of this curse that no matter how high your family's cultivation is, their lifespan will not be too long. Huh? Akido looked surprised. But why didn't I feel it? Lu Yi said, This kind of bloodline curse is extremely secretive. Perhaps one of your ancestors knows something about it. Both Akido and Lu Yi couldn't sense it. Lu Yi could only make an inference based on the reaction of the talent tree and the information provided by Akido. Then what should we do? Akido became nervous. I'm helping you solve it. Don't worry. Lu Yi comforted her. While talking to Akido, the power of the talent tree had been urging. However, according to previous experience, this situation would probably last for at least half a day. Akido said gratefully, Thank you, senior brother. For a moment, the two were speechless. Lu Yi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Both the merfolk and Akido's ancestors had encountered this strange bloodline curse. What was the source of this? He had never heard of anyone in the current starry sky who could use such a strange ability. It could also be that he didn't know enough. The starry sky was vast, and he had never encountered too many things. However, the only undeniable thing was that this kind of bloodline curse was extremely sinister and sinister. Half a day later, the abnormal movement of the talent tree disappeared. Lu Yi stopped and said, It's done. Akido opened her eyes and silently felt her body. She couldn't help but show a look of joy. It seems there's something different. Originally, the bloodline curse didn't cause her any special trouble, but at this moment, she clearly felt that her body was much more transparent, as if an invisible shackle had been unlocked. Because of the comparison between before and after, this feeling was very clear. Lu Yi smiled and said, In the future, you don't have to worry about your lifespan. If you give birth to a child, there won't be any similar problems. He could probably be sure of one thing. Akido was just a shadow, but even so, he still helped her solve the bloodline problem. This was a repayment for her previous desperate protection. Hearing him say something about giving birth to a child, Akido's face turned slightly red, but she still sincerely thanked him. Thank you, senior brother. Akido's problem was solved. The next thing to solve was the disciple of God. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed. The information that Lu Yi had sent out played a big role on the battlefield. After killing the disciple of God, isolating the space where the corpse was, could effectively prevent the disciple of God from reviving. Through this method, the cultivators of Serene End killed many enemies. For a time, the situation of Serene End had greatly improved. In the past, the cultivators were most annoyed by the disciple of God's constant revivals. Killing them once was not enough, twice was not enough. A disciple of God's Yu Yao had to be killed more than 10 times before she could be completely killed. The cultivator's energy was also limited, so even if the difference in the number of cultivators on both sides was not big, Serene End was still at a disadvantage. If it weren't for Tianhong being strong enough, Serene End would have been captured. Now that there was an effective way to deal with the revival of the disciple of God, the efficiency of killing the enemy naturally increased. Tianhong had also tried to use this method to kill Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple. Unfortunately, Tianhong didn't understand formations, and Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple's revival speed was too fast. After being killed, he could be revived within a breath. After repeated attempts, it didn't work. Instead, it alerted the enemy. Tianhong ordered Lui to find a way to kill Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple as soon as possible. What could Lu Yi do? He was just a weak medical cultivator. Previously, Tianhong valued his ability to deal with the disciple of God's disciple and let him stay in the Yunluo sacred ground to help. She even sent Abduluo to protect his safety. Now, she wanted to put this heavy burden on him. It was unreasonable. It was a pity that the little flower world couldn't contain Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple. After all, the size of the little flower world was limited. Otherwise, he could cooperate with Tianhong and wait for Tianhong to kill Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple and put him into the little flower world. In this way, they could probably prevent him from reviving. Moreover, the little flower world needed time to open. Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple's revival speed was too fast, so there was not enough time to open the little flower world. Lu Yi of Zhai Xinglu looked at the disciple of enlightened God in front of him. Recently, dozens of disciples of enlightened God had died under his various attempts. These disciples of enlightened God had one thing in common, which was that they were not afraid of death. Even if it was just a constellation, they could still show no fear in such a situation. Have you thought about it? Abluo squeezed the disciple of God's disciple's neck, restricting his movements, and urged him. From the beginning, Lu Yi had a heavy expression on his face, as if he had to make an extremely important and difficult choice. Hearing Abluo's urging, Lu Yi finally made a decision and said, "Kill him." Abluo squeezed his hand, and the disciple of God's disciple's neck was immediately crushed by him. He died on the spot and fell to the ground like a noodle. Lu Yi took a step forward, squatted down, and raised his hand to press on the disciple of God's disciple's body. The next moment, countless imperceptible roots, centered on his palm, quickly extended into the disciple of God's disciple's body. In the blink of an eye, they had covered every corner of his body. When he looked up, Lu Yi could see a small blood flower appearing on the disciple of God's disciple's head. There was a faint bloody light blooming from the blood flower. There was no doubt that there was a vitality in the air, turning into the disciple of God's disciple's capital to revive. It would not be long before this disciple of God's disciple came back from the dead. Lu Yi gritted his teeth and activated the power of the talent tree. He had tried to burn the disciple of God's disciple before, but the effect was not great. That method would only make the disciple of God die again and be resurrected again and again. So this time, he used a method that he had never used before. The roots of the talent tree not only had the power to burn, but the countless tiny roots were really like the roots of a tree. They had a powerful devouring ability. When Lu Yi was cultivating, he used the talent tree to devour the water of the 1,000-elephant sea. But this time, the target of the devouring was the disciple of God in front of him. This was something that Lu Yi had never done, even if he knew that he could do it. The previous owner of the talent tree often did this, but it seemed that because he was addicted to it, it affected his own temperament and even brought disaster to the former 9 states. Su Yuqing also warned him that the power of the Tao tree could burn everything in the world, except for one thing, which was the 7 emotions and 6 desires of living creatures. So Lu Yi always knew that this was not good for him. This time, if it was not a last resort, he would not have made this choice. The devouring power of the talent tree was activated, and a large amount of gray fog rose from the tree. Everything in the disciple of God's disciple's body was quickly drained. The originally plump body was shriveled up at a speed visible to the naked eye, which made Abro and Akijuo's scalp tingle. They did not know what means Lu Yi had used. Lu Yi, on the other hand, shuddered and let out a muffled groan. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel an indescribable joy. It was as if some kind of evil in his body had been released, as if he had tasted the most delicious food in the world. This kind of joy extended from the physical to the soul, causing one to become obsessed and sink into oblivion. Lu Ye's heart was full of warning signs, and he suddenly bit the tip of his tongue. When the pain came, he could not help but take a few steps back, breaking away from contact with the disciple of God. Not far in front of him, Akijuo and Abro both looked at him in surprise. Lu Yi quickly gathered his thoughts and looked at the disciple of God, just in time to see him turn into little dots of light and dissipate. End of chapter. Chapter 1927. The enlightened disciple was completely dead, which undoubtedly meant that Lu Ye's attempt was successful, but he did not feel the slightest joy. Even at this moment, he was still reminiscing about that wonderful feeling in his mind. He even had the thought of trying it again surging in his mind. Taking a deep breath, he suppressed this thought. He really needed to try again, not because of selfishness, but because he was shocked by that feeling and did not pay attention to the situation of the enlightened disciple. So although the result of this attempt was right, it did not make much sense. "Bring another enlightened disciple here," Lu Yi ordered. Abdullah looked at Lu Yi seriously and turned to leave. After these days of contact, he found that there were many things about Lu Yi that he could not see through, but the two of them were not very close, so naturally he did not ask more. Akido said nervously, "Senior brother, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Lu Yi shook his head, closed his eyes, and sensed his body. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong. It seemed that as long as what happened was controlled, there should not be any big problems. The previous owner of the talent tree was too addicted to it, so his temperament changed greatly. Not long after, Abdullah brought another enlightened disciple over, and this time Lu Yi did not hesitate and killed him personally. He raised his hand and pressed it on the body of the enlightened disciple, activating the power of the talent tree as before. In an instant, the feeling of joy once again disturbed his heart, making him uneasy. He could not help but have the idea of letting go of everything, to comprehend it, and slowly savor it. Lu Yi forcibly suppressed this idea, and when he looked carefully, he immediately saw the small blood flower on the head of the enlightened disciple being swallowed by the talent tree, quickly becoming smaller and then disappearing. In just 2 breaths, the enlightened disciple's body shriveled, turned into fluorescent light, and dissipated. Sure enough, as he had guessed, there was definitely something in these enlightened disciples. That wonderful thing could not be detected, and even Rizhao could not perceive it, but in his vision, it could turn into a small blood flower, and then receive the vitality from the flesh furnace to revive the enlightened disciple. It was because of this conjecture that Lu Yi made such an attempt. Under the power of the talent tree, everything in the enlightened disciple's body had been swallowed and refined by the talent tree, and the rapid withering of the small blood flower was the best evidence. Without the guidance and positioning of the blood flower, there would naturally be no life force injected through the air. There was no need to make any more attempts. Lu Yi called out, "Let's go." "Where are we going?" Abdullah asked. "Go find Tianhong. I know how to kill that Rizhao heavenly god's disciple," Lu Yi said. Abdullah's spirit was shaken, and he quickly followed. Akido had a worried look on his face. He opened his mouth to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. A short while later, Lu Yi and his 2 bodyguards met Tianhong in the heavenly palace and reported their findings. Tianhong listened with great interest. If it were anyone else who said this, he would naturally not take it to heart, but Lu Yi was different. Recently, the information he had provided had been of great use, and now that Lu Yi had made new progress, he naturally paid attention. A moment later, Tianhong looked pensive. "So, you think that every enlightened god's disciple has a wonderful thing that is difficult to observe. If this wonderful thing is destroyed, it will break the enlightened god's disciple's ability to revive." "Understood," Lu Yi replied. Tianhong nodded. "It coincides with the information that senior brother Qin Shang sent back a few days ago. The Qin Shang he mentioned was the realm lord of the final realm. He had led the other 2 Rizhao heavenly gods to the main battlefield to participate in the battle and had not returned." Lu Ye's eyes lit up. "What did the realm lord say?" "There were many Rizhao heavenly gods on the main battlefield, so the information they could get would be more comprehensive." Tianhong said, "According to the information you sent back, the Realm Lord and the others speculated that there is probably a kind of imprint in the enlightened God's disciple's body. It is an illusory existence, so even if they are dismembered, it is difficult to detect. As long as the imprint is not destroyed, the enlightened God's disciple has the ability to revive. According to your description, the specific manifestation of the imprint should be the blood flower you saw. Lu Yi thought about it and found that it was true. Because the blood flower was also an illusory thing, although he could see it, he couldn't touch it no matter how hard he tried. What do you want to do? Tianhong asked again. Lu Yi said, I have tried it on Xingxiu Heavenly God's disciple. Even if there is no isolation power, I can kill him quickly, so I need senior brother to fight with Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple and kill him. This is no problem. Tianhong agreed. In the past few years, he had fought with Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple many times and killed him several times, but every time Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple died, he would immediately become lively again, causing Tianhong to be annoyed. One breath. That guy will revive after one breath. Are you sure? I will do my best. Lu Yi cupped his fists. Tianhong looked at him deeply, pondered for a long time, and then nodded. Then let's try. Half a day later, in a fierce battlefield, spiritual power fluctuated, and divine sense flashed back and forth. Two figures shuttled back and forth, and it was Tianhong and Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple who were fiercely fighting. Not only were the two Rizhao Heavenly Gods fighting, but the cultivators of Final Soul World and many enlightened God's disciples were also fighting, and the whole battlefield was chaotic. And just at the edge of the battlefield, three figures stood quietly. It was Lu Yi, Abdaluo, and Akijuo. Abdaluo whispered to Lu Yi, Can you do it? If you can't, don't take the risk. We have gained enough benefits this time. It is best not to interfere in a fight at the level of Rizhao. Akijuo also said worriedly, Yes, senior brother, it is better to be safe. Lu Yi didn't say anything, just stared at the place where Rizhao Heavenly God was fighting. Tianhong was indeed very strong, and had been suppressing his opponents since the beginning of the battle. However, it was easy to determine the winner of the battle, but it was not so easy to determine life and death. Tianhong used to slowly grind his opponent to death, mainly because his opponent was not afraid of death, which gave him the opportunity. This time, Tianhong did not follow his usual practice. His fighting style was undoubtedly very aggressive, and he wanted to end the battle quickly. In this way, he would inevitably pay a price, but if he could really verify the idea proposed by Lu Yi before, then the price would not be in vain. Suddenly, a violent collision of divine sense occurred, and Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple's eyes dimmed a lot. Obviously, he had suffered a great loss in this confrontation. Tianhong's expression became serious, and his spiritual power fluctuated, and his hand's seals changed. In an instant, intersecting white light burst out from Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple's body, and the two intersecting white lights seemed to be solid, fixing him in place. The next moment, the white light exploded, and a huge hole suddenly appeared in Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple's chest, but even with such a serious injury he still did not die. Tianhong did not hesitate to rush forward, reaching out his hand to grab his opponent's head, and the spiritual power in his palm surged, directly squeezing his opponent's head until it exploded. Rizhao Heavenly God's life annihilation. Almost at this moment, a imperial equipment appeared in Tianhong's hand. The imperial equipment flashed with light, and Lu Yi, who had been waiting for a long time, appeared out of thin air. One breath. Tianhong's expression was solemn, and his spiritual power surged, ready to defend himself at any time. Enough! As Lu Yi spoke, he had already reached out his hand and patted Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple's chest. The power of the talent tree fiercely urged, and countless roots penetrated into the opponent's body. The next moment, Lu Ye's body trembled slightly. The feeling of devouring Rizhao Heavenly God was completely different from devouring Constellation. The former undoubtedly brought much more joy, and he almost bit off his tongue to prevent himself from sinking into it. After a breath, Tianhong's eyes lit up, because the opponent who should have been resurrected did not show any signs of resurrection. Not only that, even his body began to rapidly dry up. 2 breaths, 3 breaths, after a full 10 breaths. Lu Yi suddenly withdrew his hand, turned his head, and spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes overflowing with light. In front of him, Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple, who had been a headache for Tianhong for several years, turned into specks of light and disappeared. Good boy! Tianhong laughed heartily and slapped Lu Yi on the shoulder. You've done a great service. It's Terminus Netherworld's fortune to have you. The method to quickly kill Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple was found by Lu Yi, and now even Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple could be killed in one go. Such a great contribution should be remembered for generations to come. Although Lu Ye's method seemed a little evil, as long as the result was good, it was enough. Abdul and Akijuo came together. The two of them did not have the ability to move quickly like Lu Yi, so naturally they came a little late. On the way, they saw Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple die, and were shocked and happy. Bring our hero back to rest, Tianhong ordered the two of them. Yes. The two bodyguards replied in unison. Lu Yi bowed to Tianhong and led the two bodyguards to Terminus World. When Lu Ye's figure entered Terminus World, Tianhong's expression turned cold, and he shouted, Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple is dead, boys, kill these monsters for me. Originally, there was Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple who could suppress Tianhong, but now that this guy was dead, no one could stop Tianhong's killing. With him personally taking action, and the morale of the cultivators of Terminus World rising, how could the remaining disciples be his opponent? In less than half a day, the disciples of Terminus World were killed, and the rest fled. The battle outside Terminus World was settled. At this time, in the secret room of Zhai Xinglu, Lu Yi was sitting cross-legged with an extremely strange expression. Because he found that after devouring Rizhao Heavenly God's disciple, he had gained a lot of benefits, which he did not feel when he devoured Xingxiu Heavenly God's disciple. First of all, his cultivation had improved a little. This was normal, as early as in the 9 regions, Lu Yi noticed that he could cultivate by devouring the power of others. Rizhao Heavenly God's power was enormous. Even if he did not devour it all, it was enough to improve his cultivation a little. However, this kind of improvement did not mean much to Lu Yi. End of chapter. Chapter 1928. His cultivation had improved a little, and his divine sense had also grown a little. However, this was not important. What surprised Lu Yi was that the quality of his spiritual source seemed to have improved a little. Before entering this training scene, he had just refined a lot of treasures that could improve the quality of his spiritual source. Naturally, he knew the state of his spiritual source. After carefully sensing it, he found that his spiritual source had indeed changed a little. The change was not big, only equivalent to refining a piece of green moon spirit follower. Even so, it was enough to surprise Lu Yi. He did not expect that his method of dealing with Heavenly God disciples would have such an unexpected harvest. Ever since his cultivation had reached the late Yuyao stage, he had been troubled by the problem of the quality of his spiritual source. According to his speculation, he had to polish his spiritual source to perfection before he could successfully condense the flower of qi. This was one of the reasons he came to the Azura field. Based on the current speed of obtaining Azura seals, it would take a long time to improve the quality of his spiritual source by exchanging resources from the Azura treasury. It would take at least a few decades, and this was under the premise that everything went smoothly. However, if he supplemented it with this method, the time needed would be greatly reduced. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel excited. He couldn't help but recall the intense joy he felt when he devoured the Solar God's disciple. Even now, that wonderful feeling was still lingering in his mind. Thinking of this, Lu Ye's expression turned cold, and he was secretly shocked. He had only tried it a few times, and he was already addicted to it. Back then, Chao Nian was probably lost like this. He secretly rejoiced that he did not do this when his cultivation was not high. Otherwise, who knew what he would be like now? If his cultivation was not high enough, his mind would not be calm enough, and he would definitely not be able to resist such temptation. Now that he had reached the late Yuyao stage and had traveled extensively for so many years, his experience had increased greatly, and he was able to stay calm. However, there was one thing that puzzled him. Because before devouring Heavenly God disciple, He had tried it with 2 constellations, but there was no similar effect. It seemed that the cultivation of the constellations was too low. After all, he was already a Yu Yao. The talent tree had accompanied him for many years. He thought that he understood it well enough, but now it seemed that he had taken it for granted. The entire final soul realm was in jubilation. The battle that had troubled their realm for several years had finally come to an end, ending with their realm's great victory. Just one day after the battle, Tianhong issued a mobilization order, gathering all the cultivators in the constellations of this world to participate in the main battlefield. The crisis of this world had been resolved, but the main battlefield was still bustling with activity. If they wanted complete peace, they had to get rid of all the disciples of God on the main battlefield. Lu Yi had shown his ability to kill Heavenly God's disciples in a short time, so he naturally treated him as his trump card. A day later, Lu Yi sat cross-legged on a star boat. Tianhong steered the star boat and took him to the main battlefield. Abdo didn't come with them this time. Under Tianhong's orders, he led the cultivators of Netherworld Realm to the battlefield. Rizhao's speed was extremely fast. After setting off from the final soul realm, it only took him 2 days to arrive at the main battlefield. Here, Lu Yi met many Sunshine elites from the galaxy. They had heard about Lu Ye's amazing techniques from Tianhong. Naturally, these Sunshine elites were full of praises for Lu Yi. Lu Yi didn't expect the situation of this experiential learning to slowly develop to this point. At first, he thought that as long as the problem of Netherworld Realm was solved, the experiential learning would be over. But now, it seemed that if he wanted to end this experiential learning, he had to completely defeat the disciples of God. In this battlefield with so many Rizhao, He Yuyao was still too weak. Fortunately, the Rizhao powerhouses knew that he was very important, and Tianhong was protecting him, so as long as he was careful, there shouldn't be any problems. This was the basic rule of the Azura field experiential learning. No matter what kind of experiential learning it was, there would be danger, but no matter how dangerous it was, it would not lead to certain death. Looking for a glimmer of hope in that crisis was what the cultivators who participated in the experiential learning needed to do. The situation on the main battlefield was actually in the advantage of the allied forces of this galaxy. Thanks to the information that Lu Yi had sent out before, the disciples of God had suffered heavy casualties recently, and the Rizhao powerhouses of this galaxy had found the brown star where the blood-colored furnace was hidden. Under the focus of the deployment, the disciples of God had been forced to change from an invasion to a defense. Now, the cultivators of the 2 sides were fighting fiercely around the sky where the brown star was located. The Rizhao powerhouses of this galaxy had repeatedly tried to break through the blockade of the disciples of God and enter the brown star to attack directly, but in the end, they had returned without success. It was because the disciples of God fought as if they didn't care about their lives. They could quickly resurrect after death, but the Rizhao powerhouses of this galaxy didn't have this ability, so even if they had a slight upper hand, they couldn't help but be restrained. After Tianhong led Lu Yi to this place, the Rizhao powerhouses gathered and had a simple discussion. After another half a day, the general attack on the brown star began. The battle instantly became extremely fierce, and the Rizhao powerhouses on the battlefield were particularly eye-catching. The spiritual power was fiercely fluctuating, the divine thoughts were surging, and all kinds of magic weapons and secret techniques were blooming. Tianhong took Lu Yi and quietly hid in a place to watch. He obviously used a magic weapon that could hide his body, so the existence of the 2 people was not noticeable at all. This kind of battle lasted for a few hours, and Tianhong suddenly stared in one direction and transmitted a message to Lu Yi, "Get ready." Lu Ye's expression turned solemn. His purpose of coming here was to completely destroy Rizhao's disciple. Therefore, Tianhong would not let him take action unless it was a critical moment. His existence was the key to the victory of this battle. After a few breaths, Lu Yi suddenly felt Tianhong grab him, and then there was a burst of wind and lightning, and then suddenly stopped. "Quick!" When Tianhong's voice sounded in his ears, Lu Yi didn't stop at all and slapped forward. His vision hadn't even recovered, and he didn't know what was in front of him. But under this palm, he did hit a warm corpse. The power of the talent tree was immediately fiercely activated, and Lu Ye's vision slowly focused, forcibly suppressing the wonderful feeling in his heart. At a glance, he saw a disciple of God who had just been killed in front of him with his eyes wide open, as if he had died with a grievance. His vision moved up, and on the top of the disciple's head, a blood flower was rapidly withering. The disciple of God, who should have been resurrected immediately, showed no signs of resurrection at this moment. It wasn't until the disciple turned into little dots of light that Lu Yi withdrew his big hand. On the side, the local galaxy Rizhao who had killed the disciple of God was dazzled. Although he had heard of Lu Ye's strange ability from Tianhong, and this battle was made with Lu Yi as the core of the plan, after all, he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. It wasn't until this moment that he felt relieved. After one of Rizhao's disciples was killed, Tianhong and Rizhao looked at each other, and the latter nodded slightly and rushed to the nearby battle without stopping. Tianhong once again activated the power of the magic weapon, covering his and Lu Ye's figure, and moved to another place to calmly observe and look for a good opportunity. In comparison with Rizhao, the local galaxy Rizhao undoubtedly had the advantage. If not, it would be impossible to persist until today without being defeated. And now, this advantage was gradually expanding. In the following period of time, several of the disciples of Rizhao were killed by Lu Yi. At this moment, the local galaxy Rizhao's final victory was no longer in doubt. And after several Rizhao had completely fallen, the disciples of God finally found the problem. Unfortunately, it was too late. They were inferior in number, and now that several of them had died, they were even more stretched. Almost every disciple of Rizhao was besieged, and it was only a matter of time before they died. This battle lasted for 3 days before it was completely over. On the entire battlefield, all the disciples of God, regardless of their cultivation level, were killed. Bursts of cheers came from all over the battlefield, and every cultivator's face was filled with an inspiring smile. Finally, it's over. Tianhong let out a long breath, raised his hand and patted Lu Yi, who had been following him, on the shoulder. "You've worked hard." Lu Yi just nodded silently and didn't say anything. In this battle, more than 10 disciples of Rizhao died in his hands. Although he had the experience of killing Rizhao before, he had never killed so many at once, and so easily. Only the experience of the Azura field could bring him such a unique experience, and it was impossible to achieve anywhere else. With Tianhong's protection, he was not in danger at all, and instead gained a lot of benefits. Not to mention the improvement of his cultivation level and spiritual sense, the quality of his spiritual source had obviously improved a lot. Although in the process of devouring, the feeling of joy could not be suppressed, Lu Yi felt that he would not be completely immersed in it because of this. This was undoubtedly a good thing for him, otherwise it was very likely that he would become the next Rizhao. "You go and rest," Tianhong ordered. Lu Yi nodded, turned around, and flew to the side of a battleship. Many Rizhao gathered in one place again, and basically all of them were injured. The battle was over, but the blood-colored furnace was still there, so what they had to do now was to completely get rid of the blood-colored furnace. After all, no one knew what this thing was, so naturally they couldn't leave it behind. The Rikishi all disappeared into the brown star. After a short while, there was a violent fluctuation of spiritual power. Looking down from the starry sky, a certain part of the star was turbulent. Obviously the Rizhao were attacking. After a while, the Rizhao returned from the star. Without stopping, they dispersed. On the battleship where Lu Yi was, Tianhong returned and greeted him warmly. Let's go home." Lu Yi raised his head and was about to respond, but suddenly his expression froze, and he stared fixedly at the top of his head. There was a blood flower thicker than all the blood flowers he had seen before, blooming proudly. Lu Yi suddenly felt his hair stand on end. As if sensing his gaze, Tianhong's eyes flashed, and the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a strange smile that Lu Yi had never seen before. What are you looking at?" Lu Yi turned around and was about to escape, but just as he moved, his body suddenly froze, and then everything around him began to shatter. End of chapter. Chapter 1929. His vision spun, and by the time Lu Yi came back to his senses, everything around him had changed. At this moment, he was in midair, the familiar aura of the world domain lingering around him. Lu Yi couldn't help but let out a breath, and when the cold wind blew, he felt his body turn cold. He was actually sweating all over just now. The situation had clearly been decided, and the heavenly god apostles had been exterminated, and the blood-red furnace hidden in the brown star had probably been destroyed. Who would have thought that Tianhong, who had always been looking after him, would have a bloody flower blooming on his head, and such a bright one at that? This undoubtedly meant that Tianhong had become a heavenly god apostle. Lu Yi didn't know what happened to Tianhong in the brown star, and he also didn't know what happened to the other Rizhao, but there was definitely something wrong with Tianhong. If the experiential learning hadn't ended at that time, Lu Yi would have used up a red talisman to escape. After identifying the direction slightly, he flew in the direction of his cave residence. Soon he returned to his cave residence. The fright just now was too terrifying, so he had to calm his mind. Suddenly, there was a movement from the Azura token. Lu Yi checked and found that it was a message from Abdullah. "Damn it, I'm still halfway there. Why did it suddenly end? What happened on your side?" Only then did Lu Yi remember that Tianhong ordered Abdullah to lead the cultivators of Netherworld Realm to the battlefield, but the speed of the cultivator army was naturally slower than Tianhong's. Calculating the time, Abdullah really hadn't arrived yet. His eyes flashing, Lu Yi replied, "What do you mean, fellow Taoist?" The one who exchanged the Azura token with Abdullah wasn't Lu Yi, but the body cultivator who helped detoxify the poison in the bounty hall. Abdullah's second message quickly came, "Stop pretending, who doesn't know who it is?" Lu Yi sniffled, thinking that he still had some things to ask this guy, so he replied, "The war is over, our galaxy has won a great victory." "I knew it was you, that brat Gushing guessed right." It seemed that Abdullah wasn't sure that the body cultivator he met in the bounty hall was Lu Yi before he sent the message. The first message was just a test, and now it was confirmed. Lu Yi didn't care, since Abdullah would find out sooner or later, so what if he was tested? "Quick, take a look at your Shura seal." Abdullah suddenly transmitted another message, as if he had discovered something incredible. Lu Yi immediately looked into it. Although this experience was very strange, and there were not many opportunities for him to fight, he had played a big role in this experience. Not only did he heal and detoxify people in the Yunluo Holy Land, but he also found a way to kill the disciples of the God of Sunshine with one blow. It could be said that no one had a bigger contribution than him. Therefore, the number of Azura seals he obtained shouldn't be small. With that in mind, Lu Yi focused his gaze and frowned. Something wasn't right. The Azura seals he obtained from the bounty hall were not consumed, and he remembered the exact number very clearly. However, the increase in Azura seals was minuscule, and after a little calculation, he realized that the Azura seals he obtained this time were only a little over 50,000. What was going on? Lu Yi looked confused. Lu Yi sent a message over, "How many Azura seals did you get?" Abdullah quickly replied, 54,000. "How about you?" "They're the same." Everyone's rewards were exactly the same, there was no difference. Something was not right. In the last experience, he had obtained more than 100,000 Azura seals, and this time, he had spent even more time. Moreover, he had played an important role in it. Lu Yi originally estimated that he would have at least 200,000 to 300,000 Azura seals, or even more, but what was going on with 54,000? Abdullah had obviously noticed this problem, so he came to Lu Yi to confirm it. "Come to the treasury, let's talk face to face." Abdullah's message came again. It was not convenient to communicate like this. Lu Yi did not refuse and immediately set off for the Azura treasury. When he appeared, he saw a burly figure appear beside him. It was Abdullah. Their eyes met and Abdullah said, "Wait, there's someone else." Lu Ye's heart moved and he vaguely guessed who it was. Sure enough, a moment later, Gu Sheng's figure appeared from the side. He turned around and saw Abdullah and said impatiently, "What's going on?" He was still recuperating when Abdullah called him over. He did not want to respond, but he knew that if he ignored him, Abdullah would definitely go to his cave residence directly, so he had no choice but to come over. Look at who this is. Abdullah pointed with a grin. Only then did Gu Xing notice Lu Yi standing to the side. The corner of his eyes twitched slightly, and he clearly had some bad memories. However, Gu Xing was born in the Yellow Dragon realm, and his upbringing was undoubtedly excellent. He immediately cupped his fists and bowed, "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Lu Yi returned the greeting. The top 3 of the Lunar Jade ranking had gathered. Lu Yi was one thing, and although he was now at the top, not many people had actually seen him. However, Abdullah and Gu Xing were different. The two of them standing here immediately attracted a lot of attention. Let's find a place to talk. Abdullah stepped to the side. Lu Yi and Gu Xing followed. After a short while, in a deserted place, Gu Xing activated a magic treasure and set up an isolation array. The 3 of them sat cross-legged in a triangular position. Gu Xing was the first to speak. He looked at Lu Yi and said, "How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" Lu Yi and Abdullah knew each other very well from their previous experience. After all, they had been together for a period of time. However, Gu Xing did not know Lu Yi's name. Lu Yi immediately introduced himself. Gu Xing nodded slightly. "Fellow Taoist Lu, I've learned a lot from you." Lu Yi said, "You were injured before, so it doesn't count. Once you've recovered, we can fight again." Lu Yi had beaten up Abdul Luo before, but that time with Gu Xing did not count. Gu Xing had been knocked out of the fighting arena by Lu Yi with a few strikes. Moreover, Gu Xing was clearly a spell cultivator. Lu Yi wanted to know what kind of background this top-notch spell cultivator from the Yellow Dragon realm had. He could not find such a good opponent outside. If he could exchange blows with Gu Xing, he could gain some experience in dealing with spell cultivators. The corner of Gu Xing's eye twitched again. Besides, my injuries, cough cough cough. Who the hell would fight with you? If it were any other opponent, no matter how strong they were, he would not back down. At most, he would lose a round. No one would really die in the arena. However, Lu Yi had the weapon of the soldier tribe. The strange power was hard to get rid of. If he was killed, he would have to put up a bounty with the Shura seal. His Shura seal did not grow on trees. Abdullah grinned from the side. "You have times when you're scared? I thought you weren't afraid of anything." Gu Xing pretended not to hear and asked, "Why are you looking for me?" Abdullah's expression turned serious. "There's something wrong. I want to ask you." Abdullah briefly explained the previous experience. Gu Xing did not pay much attention at first, but the more he listened, the more surprised he became. After Abdullah finished, Gu Xing's face was full of disbelief. "The two of you entered the same training scene? And you did not get any clues or information about the training scene. It's strange, right?" Abdullah had a confused expression. "I've been in and out of hundreds of training scenes over the years, but nothing like this has ever happened." Gu Xing said, "I haven't either." "That's not it. The key is that the two of us worked so hard to complete the training. Guess how many Shura seals we got in the end?" Gu Xing looked at him in annoyance. "Guess if I'm guessing or not." 54,000. Abdullah angrily slapped his thigh. "Only 54,000? Do you think I'm a beggar? Also, I calculated that 54,000 is just the basic reward. Brother Lu and I stayed in the training scene for about 27 days. In the Moon Jade realm, every day one stayed in the training scene would give a basic reward of 2,000 Shura seals. 54,000 was exactly 27 days. Gu Sheng's eyes widened. "So you two did not get any extra rewards?" "Not at all." Abdullah shook his head. "That's impossible." Gu Xing was a little incredulous. How could such a ridiculous thing happen? In the training, you can do anything and you won't just get a basic reward. That's what's strange. Although we didn't kill too many enemies in this training, the role we played is irreplaceable. Gu Xing fell into deep thought, and after a long while, he said, "Then why did you call me here?" Abdullah said, "Gu Xing, you have many friends, and there are many seniors here in the Yellow Dragon realm. Help me ask around and see if there are any similar situations." The situation this time was too strange. If it was only this time, it didn't matter, but he was afraid it would happen again in the future. Probably not. Although Gu Sheng said so, he still took out the Shura token and sent out a message. Actually, there's something even stranger, Lu Yi suddenly said. Abdullah and Gu Sheng looked at him together. Lu Yi said, in the previous training, Tianhong and the others killed all the disciples of the enlightened God, and then destroyed the root of the disciples of the enlightened God. But after Tianhong returned, I found that he had become a disciple of the enlightened God. I just glanced at him, and he noticed it. Just as he was about to attack me, the training suddenly ended. Hearing him say so, Gu Sheng didn't have a deep understanding of it, but Abdullah knew how powerful Tianhong was. For such a person to suddenly become a disciple of the enlightened God and attack Lu Yi, that kind of horror. Just thinking about it made him shudder. The beginning of this training was unclear, and the ending was also inexplicable. I keep having the feeling that the training wasn't really over. Abdullah said, there's no such thing as a death experience in the Shuraba. We've already eliminated the first disciple of God. Even if we've completed the mission, it's normal for it to end here. As for the heavenly rainbow, maybe that scene will continue to exist, and there will be other cultivators entering it in the future. This has happened before. The same experience scene was in different eras, and more than one group of cultivators entered it. Hearing him say so, Lu Yi felt that it was reasonable. End of chapter. Chapter 1930. While chatting, Gu Sheng constantly checked the Azura token. After a long time, he finally spoke. Your experience this time is indeed a bit strange. I've asked many people, but none of them have encountered anything similar. Then there's a problem with the Azura field? Abdullah's expression turned cold. Not necessarily. Gu Sheng shook his head. The Azura field is a starry sky treasure. Ever since the heavenly Azura race was exterminated, it has been operating like this. I've never heard of any problems with it before, so there's no reason for you to be so unlucky. What if we're just so unlucky? Abdullah looked like he wanted to argue with him. Lu Yi suddenly thought of the dice of fate. When he entered the final world to train, the dice of fate had thrown out the word unlucky. Could it be related to this? Moreover, he still could not understand why something that he had firmly tied to him would suddenly fall off on its own. The investigation was fruitless, and the outcome was sealed. Although Lu Yi and Abdullah found it very difficult to accept, this time's painstaking training only gave them a basic reward, so they could only accept their fate. They each returned to their own homes. After a training session, there was no way to enter another training scene for a short period of time. This period would probably take several days. Since Lu Yi had nothing to do, he cultivated on his own. He was not in a hurry to find Abdullah to inquire about the 3 flowers. There would be plenty of time in the future. Although they were barely familiar with each other, they did not have much friendship, so it was not good to rashly inquire about anything. He was prepared to find an opportunity in the future to bring up this matter with Abdul. He had a faint feeling that Abdul's purpose in coming to the Azura field was the same as his. They were both trying to improve the quality of their spiritual sources. They wanted to polish their spiritual sources to perfection and then condense their own flower of qi. He had originally planned to cultivate diligently, but the results were not satisfactory. Yu Yaorao came over and chatted with him for a while. This girl seemed to have something to say, but she did not speak in detail, so Lu Yi did not ask. After Yu Yaorao left, Abdullah and Gu Sheng asked about the location of Lu Ye's cave and came to visit. Lu Yi had originally intended to befriend Abdullah, so he naturally would not refuse. He thought they had something important to discuss, but who knew that they had only come to drink with him, leaving Lu Yi somewhat speechless. The banquet lasted for several days. The 3 of them sat together and chatted, allowing Lu Yi to gain a lot of knowledge. After all, whether it was Abdaluo or Gu Sheng, they both came from extraordinary domains. Moreover, the 2 of them had spent much more time in the Moon Jade realm than he had, so their knowledge and experience was naturally far greater than his. Several days later, Abdo and Gu Sheng left drunk. Lu Yi rested for a while before leaving the cave and soaring into the sky. He had to quickly earn more Azura seals to exchange for treasures that could increase the quality of his sources. Naturally, he didn't want to waste any time. his body rose up, and at a certain moment he suddenly broke through an invisible membrane. Immediately, his surroundings turned dark. He calmed himself down and waited quietly. Waiting, after an incense stick's worth of time, Lu Yi suddenly felt like cursing. Here it comes again. It was the same situation as last time. Ever since he came to the Shiraba, including this time, he had only entered 3 training scenes. The first time was normal. After a little darkness, he received a lot of information about the training scenes and then entered the training scenes. The second time was obviously not right. The third situation was exactly the same as the second. His heart was extremely vexed. Just what kind of situation was this? Others had never encountered something like this before, yet he had encountered it twice in a row. Could it be that his flying posture was wrong when he entered the training scenes? With the previous experience, Lu Yi knew that this darkness would not last for too long. It should dissipate soon, and at that time, he would appear in the training scenes. So, although he was vexed, he still suppressed his temper and waited. However, to his surprise, this wait seemed to be somewhat endless. After more than half a day, the darkness that enveloped him showed no signs of dissipating, let alone entering the training scenes. He frowned and began to try to walk in this darkness, wanting to see if there was any way to leave. However, no matter which direction he flew, he was still enveloped by the darkness. If the first time was just bad luck, then what about the second time? Lu Yi was almost certain that there was definitely something wrong with the Shiraba. It was not just his bad luck. But Gu Xing was right. The Shiraba was a starry sky treasure. Ever since the heavenly Azura clan was destroyed, it had been in operation. Why would there be a problem when it came to him? Was there something about him that was different from the others? Just as he was deep in thought, Lu Yi suddenly sensed a light coming from a certain direction. He quickly turned his head to look in that direction, but the light had already disappeared. After the initial irritation, he gradually calmed down. Even if there was a problem with the Shiraba, it should not be enough to trap him here. So, he was certain that he would definitely get out. It was only a matter of time. Even though he was in absolute darkness, Lu Yi could still clearly determine the traces of time passing. After a full 2 days, a light suddenly appeared in front of him. The light was weak, like a candle flame, but it still made Lu Yi, who had been trapped for a long time, feel relieved. His guess was right. Turning his head to look at the candle-like light, it seemed to have a mind of its own. It slowly circled in front of Lu Yi. At first, it was a small circle, then it grew larger, expanding outwards with each circle. Wherever it flowed, it left behind a bright trace. Not long after, an oval circle of light appeared in Lu Ye's vision. Then, the light burst out, dispersing the endless darkness. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and then stepped towards the circle of light. As he took a step, his vision changed. At the same time, Lu Ye's expression changed because he clearly felt an invisible force enveloping his body, binding him layer by layer. This sudden change caused him to suffer a heavy blow. He could not help but let out a muffled groan as his face suddenly turned pale. Screams and cries rang in his ears, mixed with unbridled laughter. The smell of blood lingered at the tip of his nose, his scattered vision slowly focused, and an indescribable sense of weakness welled up in his heart. Lu Yi had not experienced such a feeling for a long time and could not help but be stunned for a moment. Just as he was about to check his body, he heard a rumbling sound coming from under his feet. This sound was inexplicably familiar. In the next moment, Lu Ye's expression changed and he looked down in the direction of the sound. He saw something the size of a baby's fist tumbling around and about to freeze. Looking at this familiar thing, Lu Yi could not believe it. He hurriedly dodged and was about to raise his foot to step on it, but as soon as he moved, he immediately realized that something was wrong. His movements were very slow and his reaction was also very slow, so he did not step on it. Just as he was on tenterhooks, the dice of fate stopped rolling. Lu Yi held his breath and stared at it. Great luck. 2 large characters suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. He couldn't help but be stunned. So there was still great luck? Before, it had been luck, misfortune, and bad luck, but this time it was great luck. It was a good start, but it gave him quite a fright. After all, The dice of fate was too mysterious. If he threw a bad word, even his talent tree would have to burn for several days before it could be destroyed. But he clearly remembered that he had left the dice of fate in his cave mansion, so why would it appear here? After suffering a loss last time, Lu Yi did not dare to take this thing with him again. Last time, it was just bad luck, but if he threw a bad luck word, who knew what kind of danger he would encounter? So, before coming here for the experience this time, he deliberately put this thing in his cave mansion. In any case, he was the only one living in the cave mansion, so no one could enter or leave without his permission, so it was safe to stay there. But it still appeared. Although the result was not bad, this feeling of not being in control was not good. Lu Yi couldn't figure out how it had appeared here. The two characters of great luck turned into a faint light and entered Lu Ye's body. The same feeling as before appeared. Under this lingering feeling, Lu Yi felt that no matter what he wanted to do, he would succeed. Haha, little girl, you still want to run? Can you escape? A sudden voice suddenly sounded not far away. Lu Yi turned his head and saw a burly man walking over, grabbing a woman's long hair and dragging her over. The woman's clothes were ragged and she was in a sorry state. Although she struggled with all her might, it was to no avail. She could only cry and beg for mercy. Smelly bitch, didn't you look down on me? Today I'll let you know my power. The burly man cursed, his face full of anger and viciousness. When he looked up, he suddenly saw Lu Yi standing in front of him and raised his eyebrows. There's actually someone else. Saying so, he directly dropped the woman in his hand, pulled out a curved blade from his waist, and rushed towards Lu Yi, his face full of murderous intent. Lu Yi looked at him quietly, his expression extremely strange, because he found that something was not quite right. At this moment, a number was floating above the head of this fierce-looking burly man. A big 1,000. This number was very ethereal, obviously not real, so Lu Yi could not understand what it meant. No matter how the burly man moved, this number remained suspended above his head. Although he did not know what this number represented, he could tell at a glance that this guy was not a good person. Since he dared to attack him, there was nothing wrong with killing him. Moreover, in his opinion, this burly man was a mortal who had never cultivated and was only relying on his strength to commit crimes. Normally, Lu Yi would not even have the chance to meet such a person. The burly man's speed was still very fast compared to ordinary people. In just a few steps, he was in front of Lu Yi, the curved blade in his hand drawing an arc and slashing towards Lu Yi. However, at this moment, he tripped over something and his body became unstable. The trajectory of the curved blade in his hand also changed. At the same time, Lu Yi slowly raised his hand and gently slapped the burly man's chest. Under this palm, even if Lu Yi did not use any magic power, the burly man would not be able to survive. Feeling pain on his cheek, Lu Ye's expression changed. End of chapter. Chapter 1931. What are you doing? In the forest, the brawny man lowered his head and looked at the palm on his chest. He couldn't deny that Lu Ye's strength wasn't small, but that was all there was to it. He couldn't understand why Lu Yi would do such a thing in the middle of a battle of life and death. As he spoke, he swung his scimitar at Lu Yi again. At that moment, the palm on his chest suddenly exerted force. Lu Yi had sensed that something was wrong and had activated the power in his body. The brawny man immediately groaned and flew backward, his chest caved in, and he fell several feet away. He supported himself with his scimitar and struggled to get up. He looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. A cultivator. After saying that, he fell to the ground again, blood flowing out of his mouth. Lu Yi stood in place and raised his hand to touch his cheek. When he looked at his palm, it was covered in blood. A mortal who had never cultivated before, wielding an ordinary weapon that couldn't even be considered a magic tool, had actually injured him. This was simply unheard of. He hurriedly checked his body, only to find that he had become extremely weak. He had felt this weakness when he first arrived at this training scene. However, before he could carefully examine it, the die of fate had appeared and attracted his attention. Only now did he realize something that he couldn't accept. He was being suppressed, and it was an extremely terrifying suppression. A few days ago, when he was chatting and drinking with a brew and gushing, he had heard them talk about their experiences. Peak Yuyao experts like them would encounter the suppression of the Azura field once in every 10 times they went on a training trip. Because they were too strong, unless they were thrown into a training scene with cultivators under the sun, very few things could pose a threat to them. However, this didn't conform to the rule that every training session was risky, so the Azura field would use this method to suppress their strength. Both of them had experienced being suppressed to the point where they only had the strength of a star constellation. When Lu Yi heard this before, he guessed that he would definitely encounter it, but he didn't expect to encounter it so quickly. Moreover, the suppression he was experiencing now was countless times more severe than what a blow and Gusheng had said. Because when he carefully examined himself, he found that his current strength was only equivalent to a spirit stream realm cultivator. No, he couldn't even be considered a spirit stream realm cultivator, because he could only sense the existence of 4 spiritual cavities. The 4 spiritual cavities didn't store magic power, but spiritual power. Not only was Lu Ye's cultivation suppressed, but he was also unable to use his divine will. It was clear that even his spirit sea had been sealed. Even the strength of his physical body was suppressed to the level of someone who had just stepped into the world of cultivation. Otherwise, how could a mortal's blade injure him? Fortunately, the other party had suddenly tripped. Otherwise, who knew what would have happened if the saber had been aimed at his neck? Did the mysterious power of the dice of fate take effect? Lu Ye's expression was solemn. The situation wasn't right. It was normal to be suppressed, but it was abnormal to be suppressed to such an extent. He calmed his mind once again and checked his talent tree. If this was the suppression from the Azura field, would the talent tree be of use? Just like how the talent tree could burn away the power of the Azura contract. However, what puzzled him was that the talent tree did not have any reaction. In other words, this suppression was not some kind of external force that could be incinerated on his body. Instead, it was some kind of method that he did not know about, which was why the talent tree did not react. Despite his powerful cultivation, he was only left with the strength of 4 orifices. Fortunately, he could still sense the talent tree. This meant that he could activate the talent tree. In addition, he still had the mountain pandao. This was a sharp blade transformed from the soldier tribe. Even if he only had the strength of 4 orifices left, with this divine weapon in hand, it should not be a problem for him to complete this training. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. At the same time, Lu Yi suddenly caught a glimpse of a light from the corner of his eye. It was coming from the direction of the dead man. He instinctively thought that he had encountered an attack and hurriedly tried to dodge. However, he was still unable to dodge in time. The light hit his waist and disappeared. However, Lu Yi did not feel that he had been attacked. He looked at the dead man in bewilderment and found that he was indeed dead. Then what was that light just now? Looking carefully, Lu Yi found something different. The 1,000 floating above the man's head had disappeared. His corpse was also dissipating into fluorescent light. Thinking about where the light hit, Lu Yi hurriedly grabbed the Azura token at his waist and checked the number representing the Azura seal. It increased by 1,000. Because the Azura seal he obtained from the previous training was not quite right, Lu Yi was very clear about how many Azura seals he had now. Compared to before, his Azura seal had increased by 1,000. Could it be? Lu Yi's eyes lit up. This was really good luck. Although he was a little unhappy that he was suppressed like never before, where else could he find such a good thing to obtain 1,000 Azura seals from killing an evil man? He was originally worried that this training would be the same as last time. He did not want to spend so much time and energy only to obtain the most basic experience. Now, it seemed that his worries were unnecessary. Punishing evil and eliminating evil could directly increase his Azura seal. There was no need to wait for the final tally. Immortal Master! A cry sounded, followed by a person crawling over to Lu Yi and kneeling in front of him, crying and begging, "Immortal Master, please save us." As she spoke, she called out. Lu Yi looked down and found that the person kneeling in front of him was the woman who had been caught just now. She kowtowed so hard that the ground soon turned dark red. Lu Yi blinked and stared at the top of the woman's head because he suddenly found that there was also a floating number above her head. Moreover, the number was even bigger than the one of the evil man. 2,000. This undoubtedly meant that as long as he killed her, he could obtain 2,000 Azura seals. Although 2,000 was not much, it was the basic reward for staying in the training scene for a day. This miserable woman was also an evil person? Lu Yi frowned. It did not look like it. He did not understand what was going on. The woman was still calling out, "Immortal Master," in an extremely sorrowful voice. Lu Yi pondered for a moment, then bent down and stretched out his hand. "Stand up and talk." The woman was helped up by him. Her face was full of sadness and there was a hint of urgency in her eyes. "Immortal Master, please save us." Lu Yi also noticed that there was a problem. At the foot of the mountain, there was a village that was on fire and there were sounds of fighting coming from there. Obviously, this woman was not the only one who had suffered. She was only targeted by the evil man because of her outstanding appearance and figure and was captured to do evil here. At this distance, Lu Yi could easily detect her, but he was suppressed so badly that he did not notice in time. Seeing that Lu Yi had sensed the situation there, the woman hurriedly said, "Immortal Master, bandits attacked and many people died. Immortal Master, please be merciful and save us." Lu Ye's expression immediately turned cold. How dare they act so arrogantly in broad daylight? They are simply lawless. Wait for me to deal with them. One bandit was worth 1,000 Azura seals, and there were even more at the foot of the mountain. Lu Yi did not expect to encounter such a good thing. The dice of fate was indeed mysterious. The woman was stunned, then overjoyed. She did not expect Lu Yi to be so easy to talk to. She wanted to say something, but Lu Yi had already rushed down the mountain. She could only shout, "Immortal Master, be careful. There seems to be a cultivator among the bandits." Lu Yi heard her shout, but he did not care. His strength was indeed suppressed, but with the mountain pan saber in hand, what did he have to be afraid of? A moment later, he single-handedly killed his way into the village. At a glance, he saw many fierce-looking bandits chasing after the villagers. These bandits were extremely violent. They clearly had the ability to kill quickly, but they were not in a hurry to kill. Instead, they chased after the fleeing villagers as if they were playing a game. They slowly tortured the villagers to death as they cried and begged in despair. Even though Lu Yi knew that the dead villagers were just shadows, this scene still made him angry. The reason he agreed to the woman's request was mainly to confirm his own thoughts. The woman and the burly man he killed both had numbers representing Azura seals above their heads. This was obviously not a coincidence, and the others should also have numbers representing Azura seals. He came for the Azura seals, so he was naturally happy to earn more Azura seals in the process of punishing and eliminating evil. At this moment, he did see numbers representing Azura seals above the bandits' heads. However, even if there were no Azura seals, Lu Yi could not just stand by and watch. "There's someone here." A bandit holding a machete noticed his figure and immediately called out. Immediately, several bandits who were chasing after the villagers came whistling over and met Lu Yi in unison. These bandits each held a different weapon. Seeing that Lu Yi was alone and not afraid, the bandit who had called out to him also sensed that something was wrong. He shouted, "Be careful, this person seems to be quite capable." As he spoke, he fiercely stabbed his spear at Lu Yi. Lu Yi's strength was suppressed, but after so many years of life and death battles, he still had a keen eye. When faced with this attack, he just tilted his head slightly and easily dodged it. Taking advantage of the momentum, he closed in on the armed bandit in the blink of an eye. He raised his hand and pressed on the mountain pan saber, then pulled it out. He could not pull it out. Lu Yi almost cursed it out loud. "Field. This was too much." It was one thing to suppress his strength, but even the mountain pan saber was suppressed? Even if he was only left with the strength of a 4 apertures cultivator, he should have been able to pull out his saber. This situation was clearly caused by the Azura field. He felt that he was being targeted. The huge Azura field was filled with malice towards him. At this moment, there was no time to think. Lu Yi raised the hand holding the hilt of his saber and punched the bandit in the face. Spiritual power lingered around the tip of his fist. How could a bandit who had never cultivated block this punch? The sound of skull shattering rang out as the bandit flew backwards. Lu Yi casually grabbed the bandit's spear and turned it around, casually thrusting it to the side, right into the chest of another bandit that was pouncing over. The spear instantly pierced through his chest. End of chapter. Chapter 1932. In the blink of an eye, 2 bandits had been killed, leaving only 3 bandits who were rushing towards Lu Yi. Seeing this, they couldn't help but stop in their tracks, a look of fear on their faces. These bandits only had a little more strength and ruthlessness than ordinary people. Although they had seen many life and death situations, they didn't have the courage to face it head-on. Swoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. Lu Yi, who was about to attack again, suddenly turned around and flicked the spear in his hand, accurately hitting an arrow coming from behind. With a bang, the arrow broke in two. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the arrow's source and saw a short bandit squatting on a roof, a longbow in his hand drawn and looking in his direction. The bandit had a dull expression on his face at this moment, obviously not expecting Lu Yi's reaction to be so fast. It was easy to dodge an open spear but hard to defend against a hidden arrow. His sneaky arrow had been blocked like this. Their eyes met, and the bandit quickly pulled out an arrow from the arrow basket on his back and drew the bowstring. In the next moment, his expression became one of panic because he saw Lu Yi throw the spear in his hand towards him. He instinctively wanted to dodge, but the spear was too fast. In a flash, his whole body was pierced by the spear and he was sent flying with a scream. "Let's kill him together." The 3 bandits beside Lu Yi saw that Lu Yi had lost his spear, and their courage was boosted. A bearded man shouted and took the lead to slash at Lu Yi. At this moment, Lu Yi's back was facing him. He had succeeded. The bearded man was overjoyed. However, just as the machete was about to fall, Lu Yi suddenly turned around and the machete brushed past his sleeve. The bearded man was stunned. Why did this person seem to have eyes on the back of his head? Before he had time to think, he felt a pain in his wrist and his machete was taken away. Then his vision spun. Lu Yi held the machete in his hand and faced the remaining 2 bandits head-on. Under the stunned gazes of the 2 bandits, he killed them on the spot. More bandits appeared from all over the place, armed with different weapons, and rushed towards Lu Yi with bloodshot eyes. Above the heads of these fellows was a seemingly ethereal and varied number of large characters, causing Lu Yi to be enraptured. Although there weren't many bandits, there were still more than 10 of them. Including the few he had killed earlier, the total number of bandits attacking this village was about 20. Lu Yi was in a wonderful mood. Although he felt that he had been targeted by the Azura field and his strength had been suppressed too much, this was really a good place. He charged forward alone, and wherever he passed, the bandits fell into a pool of blood one after another. These bandits had originally thought that they could take down Lu Yi alone, but in just a moment, more than half of them had been killed or injured. The remaining bandits were instantly terrified. How could they not know that after walking for so long in the night, they had finally met a ghost? Immediately, someone ran while shouting, Sixth Master, save me." With a bang, the door of a house was broken open, and a bare-chested, burly man broke through the door. In the room behind him, a naked girl was curled up on a messy bed, crying helplessly. The burly man glanced around and saw that the brothers he had brought with him had suffered heavy casualties, and immediately became furious. He quickly came to a black horse in front of the house and mounted it. Lifting a huge spear, he clamped his legs and tightened the reins. The black horse immediately neighed and galloped towards Lu Yi. "Which scoundrel dares to ruin my great Wind Mountain's business?" he roared as he approached Lu Yi. Lu Yi heard the noise and turned his head to look. At a glance, he saw the large number 3,000 above the burly man's head. He then associated it with the shout of the bandit just now and suddenly raised his eyebrows, knowing that this guy should be the leader of this group of bandits. As expected of a leader, his value was different. The bandits he had killed before were all worth a little more than 1,000, but this one was worth 3,000. The distance between the two was not too far, and the Sixth Master's speed was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had rushed not far in front of Lu Yi. The huge spear in his hand was obviously not light, and was not something an ordinary person could handle. What surprised Lu Yi was that he felt a trace of spiritual power from the sixth master's body. It was very weak, but there was no doubt that it was spiritual power. He suddenly remembered the warning of the woman on the mountain, saying that there was a cultivator in this group of bandits. It seemed that she was talking about this person. However, in Lu Ye's opinion, even if one opened their spiritual apertures, they could not be considered a cultivator if they did not form a system. Just like now, he only had the power of 4 apertures. Because these 4 apertures were independent and did not form a circulation path, they could not be considered a cultivator. The sixth master was even worse. His spiritual power was extremely weak, and Lu Yi estimated that he had only opened 1 aperture. He could barely be considered a beginner in cultivation. The difference in strength between 1 aperture and 4 apertures was not very big. Whether it was physical fitness or reaction speed, it all depended on one's talent. Under the same foundation, 4 apertures were stronger than 1 aperture. Lu Yi had walked step by step from this stage, so he was naturally well aware of this. Right now, the sixth master was charging over aggressively with his horse. With the strength he could display now, if he really met force with force, it would be a situation where he would lose 800 of his own men. Die! The sixth master's spear fiercely stabbed at Lu Yi. Under this spear, even if there was a big rock in front of him, it would be smashed to pieces. Then his expression became startled, because almost at the moment he pulled out his spear, Lu Yi suddenly jumped up lightly and stepped on his spear. In an instant, the sixth leader felt that his spear had become incomparably heavy, and even he and his horse paused slightly. It turned out that a heavy pressure spirit pattern flashed under Lu Ye's feet. Before he could react, Lu Yi had already arrived in front of him along the spear. The sixth master cried out in alarm and quickly flipped off his horse, rolling on the ground. He hastily got up and was about to continue fighting when his body suddenly went limp. Then, a large amount of blood gushed out from his neck, dyeing everything in front of him red. His gaze became frightened. He threw away his spear and covered his neck with both hands, but he could not stop the blood from flowing out. He had no idea when Lu Yi had attacked. When the remaining bandits saw this scene, they all cried out in alarm and fled in all directions. How could Lu Yi let them run away? Every one of these bandits was a living Azura seal. Seeing a big rock at his feet, he immediately bent down and punched out, smashing the big rock into pieces of different sizes. He then grabbed the pieces and threw them out. After a series of screams, many of the bandits' heads were smashed and they died. Lu Ye's chi and blood surged, and streams of light flew from all directions and entered the Azura seal at his waist. Behind him, a house was burning, and scorching heat waves swept out. Under the illumination of the fire, Lu Ye's expression became somewhat twisted and ferocious. The villagers who were lucky enough to survive the turmoil just now all looked at him in horror and anxiety. They felt that he was much more terrifying than those bandits. An hour later, the fire was extinguished. In front of the burned ruins, Lu Yi sat on a large rock, inspecting his Azura seals. Just now, he had gained about 30,000 Azura seals. Although it wasn't much, when he thought about the last experiential learning where he had toiled for so long, he had only gained a little over 50,000 Azura seals. 30,000 Azura seals seemed like a lot. Moreover, this was only the beginning. He was trying to figure out what was going on with this training. Admittedly, both Abdullah and Gushing had encountered situations where they were suppressed, preventing them from unleashing their full strength. However, their suppression was at most at the level of a star constellation. Compared to what he was experiencing now, it was simply incomparable. He was a late-stage moon jade cultivator, but now he only had the power of 4 apertures left. Who would believe this? Even the mountain plate saber had been sealed by the power of the Azura field. Even his storage ring, he could not open it. Also, when he entered the training scene, he was trapped in the darkness for 2 whole days. That was very strange. However, he did not have a clue at the moment. He only felt that he should be, as if he was being targeted. He already knew that the Azura field had its own consciousness. However, he did not do anything special after entering the Azura field. Why was he being targeted? Moreover, a starry sky treasure like the Azura field, even if it really had a consciousness, it should not have any good or bad. It would only operate according to its own rules and maintain the experience scenes. Unless the Azura field had a complete consciousness like the reincarnation tree. Lu Yi could not figure it out at the moment, so he could only focus on the present. The strength of a 4 apertures cultivator was still too weak. Although he did not expend much energy killing those bandits, it was still somewhat exhausting. There were only about 20 bandits. If he were to encounter more, he might really be exhausted. The powerful physique that he relied on was not of much use in this experience scene. The wound on his cheek had not healed yet. If he could raise his cultivation base, it would undoubtedly be more convenient for him for this experience. The only thing he could use now was the talent tree. This was something that even the Azura field could not suppress. He tried to use the power of the talent tree to devour the surroundings and recover the spiritual power he had expended. However, he found that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in this world was extremely thin. This was obviously an extremely low-level realm. It was already very rare for people to open spiritual apertures and produce spiritual power in such a realm. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens for him to raise his cultivation base in such an environment. Moreover, Lu Yi was not sure if he could raise his cultivation base even if the environment was suitable. After all, this was the suppression of the Azura field. If this suppression could not be broken, then his cultivation base would be stuck at the level of 4 apertures. Immortal Master. A somewhat old voice sounded. Lu Yi looked up and saw an old man with a walking stick standing in front of him. Beside the old man was the young girl he had saved on the mountain. End of chapter. Chapter 1933. Behind the old man and the young girl stood the villagers who were still alive. The village wasn't large to begin with only 100 or so people. After the bandits' attack, only half of them were still alive, and most of them were women, children, and the elderly. At this moment, all of them were looking at Lu Yi in awe. This immortal master had killed more than 20 bandits by himself. Many of them had seen it with their own eyes. If it weren't for him, they would all be dead today. Therefore, even though the immortal master didn't look like a good person for a moment, the villagers were still grateful. Lu Yi looked at these people and was immediately dazzled by the large number above their heads. The bandits were living Azura seals, and so were these villagers. Their value was even higher than the bandits. The young girl he had met on the mountain was worth 2,000 Azura seals, and the old man she was supporting was even more exaggerated. The number above his head was so big that Lu Yi almost thought he was seeing things. The bandit leader he had killed was worth 3,000 Azura seals. How could this weak old man with half his neck be worth 5,000 Azura seals? These villagers were worth at least 2,000 Azura seals, and a few of them were worth 3,000. Even if there were only 50 of them, their total value was at least 100,000 Azura seals. If Lu Yi wanted to, he could kill all these unarmed ordinary people and gain almost the same amount of income as a training trip. Most of these people were just shadows, not real people. Therefore, he didn't have to feel guilty about killing them. Immortal Master, Gale Mountain has suffered heavy losses this time. They will definitely not let this go. They have 6 leaders, and the one who died was the weakest. I heard that the leader of Gale Mountain has been cultivating for many years and his strength is unfathomable. Immortal Master, you should plan ahead. Lu Ye's eyes lit up. Gale Mountain, where is it? Even if these people were just shadows, Lu Yi wouldn't kill them. He was just curious why these ordinary people were worth more than the bandits. However, he didn't have to feel guilty about killing the bandits. He could be chivalrous and gain benefits at the same time. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The old man was probably the village chief of this village. He replied, "This is the Great Wind Mountain." However, the Great Wind Mountain covers a large area. Many years ago, a group of bandits took over the mountain and claimed it as their king. They used the name of the Great Wind Mountain to commit crimes everywhere. Then do you know where they are? Lu Yi asked again. I'm not sure. The old man shook his head and looked at Lu Yi with a strange expression. He had kindly warned Lu Yi mainly because he wanted Lu Yi to leave as soon as possible. The Grand Wind Mountain would definitely come for revenge. Who would have thought that this immortal master was not only not afraid, but also excited? What kind of person was this? Do any of you know where the base of these bandits is? Lu Yi looked at the surviving villagers. Most of them shook their heads, indicating that they did not know. Only a man dressed like a hunter said, Immortal Master, the bandits of Gale Mountain are well hidden. Most people don't know their exact location. Even if they happen to see them, they would be killed. But there are people who know. Lu Yi looked at him. The hunter turned his head and looked to the side. Lu Yi followed his gaze and saw the handsome black horse left behind by the sixth elder. His eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, an old horse knows the way. As long as I ride it, it should be able to lead me to the base of the bandits. With this thought, Lu Yi no longer hesitated. He slowly got up and walked towards the black horse. Immortal Master, where are you going? The old man asked in a trembling voice. Although he had some guesses, he did not dare to be sure. Of course I'm going to eradicate all evil, Lu Yi said as he mounted the horse and picked up the thick spear left behind by the sixth elder. This thing was about 200 kilograms. It was not something that ordinary people could handle. He could not use the Panshan saber, but in this environment, this spear would be an invincible weapon. The black horse was somewhat unruly. Lu Yi casually patted it on the back and used his spiritual power to make it behave. Immortal Master, there are many strange beasts in Gale Mountain. Please be careful. The hunter looked at Lu Yi's back and couldn't help but remind him. Lu Yi just waved his hand casually. After watching Lu Yi's back disappear, the crowd looked at the old man. The hunter said, Village chief, what should we do next? The village was destroyed and more than half of the villagers were dead or injured. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the bandits of Gale Mountain would definitely seek revenge. If they continued to stay, they would not have a good ending. No one knew if the immortal master who left could eliminate the bandits of Gale Mountain. If he could, then it would be good. But if he couldn't, then disaster would be waiting for them. The old man pondered for a moment, then sighed and said, Take everything you can and migrate. They could not stay here. They could only find a suitable place to settle down. But in today's world, who knew what would happen to them if they left their homes? The villagers were silent for a while, then dispersed to pack up their things. In the forest, Lu Yi let his horse reins and rummaged through a parcel in his hand. The parcel was on the black horse's back. It should belong to the sixth leader. After searching, Lu Yi found a lot of jerky and 2 sets of clothes. In addition, there were a few things that looked like golden leaves. Lu Yi guessed that they were the currency of this realm. A rumbling sound was heard. Lu Yi quickly patted his chest and found that the dice of fate was still there. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Then, his eyes widened in disbelief. He finally realized what the rumbling sound was. That was the sound of movement coming from his stomach. He was hungry. Lu Yi didn't know how long it had been since he last felt this way. As his cultivation gradually improved, he no longer needed to eat. Eating was more to satisfy his appetite. But right now, he could clearly feel his hunger. The aroma of the jerky suddenly became rich. Lu Yi immediately picked up a piece and put it in his mouth. He then grabbed a water bottle on the horse's back and drank a few mouthfuls. Suddenly, the talent tree reacted. Lu Yi focused his mind and observed it. He found that there was an extremely thin gray fog on the talent tree. Poison? Lu Yi was astounded. What kind of plaything was that sixth master? How could he poison his own food? Who was he guarding against? But judging from the talent tree's reaction, the poison didn't seem to be much. Lu Yi didn't care. He ate a few mouthfuls of jerky and drank a mouthful of water. Slowly, Lu Yi confirmed one thing. The poison was not in the jerky, but in the water. It made no difference to him. After eating his fill, Lu Yi began to cultivate, transforming his blood and qi into spiritual power. Although the talent tree could devour the world's spirit energy to replenish its consumption, the world's spirit energy was too thin. It didn't have much effect. On the contrary, the cultivation method of transforming one's blood and qi into spiritual power was more efficient. This was also his initial cultivation method. Because he wasn't talented enough back then, he couldn't absorb the world's spirit energy and the energy in spirit stones, so he could only use this method. Even after many years, Lu Yi still didn't forget. Moreover, when he was at this stage, the talent tree hadn't transformed yet. It wasn't like now, when it had a powerful devouring ability. Once the food entered his stomach, Lu Yi only needed to slightly stimulate the talent tree to completely devour it, transforming it into his own blood and qi. Then, he could transform it into spiritual power. His cultivation efficiency was many times faster than before. An hour later, his stomach was hungry again. Lu Yi continued to eat and cultivate. After a few times, a big bag of jerky was completely consumed. The spiritual power he used in the battle was also replenished. Gradually, Lu Yi found something that made him pleasantly surprised. The Azura field suppression on him wasn't absolute. He could use cultivation to break open more spiritual cavities and increase his strength. This was undoubtedly something to look forward to. Along the way, the black horse's speed wasn't very fast. Lu Yi didn't know whether it was going the right way or not, but since things had already reached this point, he could only trust it. In the evening, when they reached a place, the black horse suddenly became restless. Lu Yi, who was in the middle of cultivation, sensed something and turned his head to look in a certain direction. Over there, in a bush, a pair of green eyes were staring at him. For pairs of eyes met, and a fishy wind blew against Lu Ye's face. A huge and vigorous figure rushed out, roaring like a beast. A bloody mouth appeared in Lu Ye's field of vision. The black horse was frightened and neighed. Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed the thick spear left behind by the sixth master, and stabbed it forward. The 200 gene weight was as light as a feather, and the beast was directly pierced through, hanging on the spear. "Don't cry." Lu Yi slapped the black horse's back. After a short while, Lu Yi sat cross-legged next to a raging bonfire. A large piece of beast meat was sizzling on the fire, and a fragrant smell assailed his nose. The hunger in Lu Ye's stomach became more obvious. With the talent tree, no matter how much he ate, he could quickly digest it and use it to increase his strength. Moreover, after killing this thing that looked like a leopard, he discovered something else. The beasts of this world didn't seem to be ordinary beasts. They were much more ferocious than the beasts he knew. Even the black horse left behind by the sixth master was the same. It should be known that although he didn't weigh much, the spear was not light. After a day, the black horse didn't feel much fatigue. Was this a strange beast? Lu Yi remembered the hunter's warning before he left. From this point of view, the so-called strange beasts were more ferocious and stronger than ordinary beasts, but not yet at the level of monster beasts. It was in line with the level of this world. Because this world itself was born with the concept of cultivation, but it was a low-level domain that hadn't really stepped into the level of cultivation. Suddenly, there was the sound of footsteps. Under the flickering light of the fire, two figures came from the front. Before they arrived, one of them said, "Please forgive us for visiting so late at night. The mountain roads are difficult to travel, and the night is cold. Seeing the fire, we wanted to seek warmth. Friend, please don't blame us." Chapter 1934. Next to the bonfire, Lu Yi looked up and saw two figures slowly approaching, swaying with the light of the fire. After a short while, a man and a woman came to a stop not far away. The man was tall while the woman was petite and cute. They seemed to be husband and wife. "Greetings, brother." The man cupped his fists, but the petite woman standing beside him glanced at the black horse behind Lu Yi, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. Lu Yi looked at the top of their heads with an intrigued expression. "Are you bandits from Empty Gale?" The man's face suddenly changed. "Friend, please don't speak nonsense. We husband and wife are just passing by and have never done anything outrageous." "Is that so?" "Of course." Puff puff. Two soft sounds suddenly came out. The man opposite was taken aback. "What's that sound?" The petite woman also retracted her gaze from the black horse and sniffed gently with her nose. There's the smell of blood, no. At this moment, the man also reacted, his face suddenly became fierce, and he leaped high into the air, rushing straight towards Lu Yi. Pucci! Lu Yi sat on the ground without moving, but a thick spear suddenly appeared in his hand. He directly pierced through the man and hung him on the spear. The man looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. Although they knew Lu Yi was not to be trifled with when they saw the black horse, they didn't expect him to be so ruthless. Where did they get exposed? The petite woman had just pulled out a long whip from her waist and was about to attack when she saw her companion stabbed to death. Her beautiful face changed color and she turned to flee. She knew the enemy was not weak, but she didn't expect him to be this strong. With a whoosh, the sound of something breaking through the air came from behind, followed by a thick blood-stained spear suddenly falling from the sky, grazing her towering chest before stabbing into the ground 2 feet in front of her. The woman froze in place, cold sweat dripping down her back as the night wind blew. She naturally didn't think the enemy made a mistake. This precise control was clearly a warning. If she dared to run again, she would inevitably follow in her companion's footsteps. Moments later, Lu Yi was gnawing on a thick beast leg. Across from the bonfire, the woman was kneeling on the ground, trembling. She didn't dare to escape, so she had returned. Tell me. Crunching sounds came from Lu Ye's mouth. It was the sound of bones being crushed. The way he ate made the woman feel even more ferocious and terrifying. We came from the stockade. The 6th master hasn't returned yet, so we're here to pick him up. Just as Lu Yi had thought, these guys were indeed bandits. In fact, when Lu Yi saw them, he already had some guesses because the numbers above their heads were the same as the bandits, a little over 1,000. Furthermore, how could a normal person travel in such a deep forest at such a late hour? Olma really knew the way. He was a little worried that he had gone in the wrong direction, but now it seemed that he was right. The stronghold that the woman spoke of was undoubtedly the gathering place of the mountain bandits. There should be a lot of azure seals there. There weren't 2 of them but 4. The man and the woman were in direct contact to distract Lu Yi, while the other 2 secretly approached, ready to take him down. However, Lu Yi had already sensed it. 2 small stones were easily taken care of by the 2 bandits. The first popping sound was the sound of stones killing people. After the woman finished speaking, she carefully looked up at Lu Yi, but saw that he didn't react at all. He was still eating heartily. After a while, she heard Lu Yi order, "Continue roasting." HM? The female bandit was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted. She eagerly got up, cut off a large piece of meat from the beast's corpse, and roasted it in the volcano. After all, the woman was more careful. She even brought seasonings with her when she went out. This undoubtedly made Lu Yi very happy. With seasonings, the roasted meat wasn't so bland anymore. 1 roasted and 1 ate, the scene was strange. The woman's roasting skills were very good. Every time she roasted the meat until it was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. As she roasted, the corners of her mouth curled up, and her eyes flashed with pride. So what if you're strong? After eating so much 7 fragrance powder, I'll turn you into a fish on the chopping board. Bandits like them had endless tricks up their sleeves when facing their enemies. It was normal for them to secretly poison their food. Under normal circumstances, they would have to be careful when poisoning their food to avoid being discovered. However, at this moment, with the help of seasonings, no one would be able to tell. In the woman's opinion, the person who killed the 6th master was probably a young master from a big family. Although he had some skills, he didn't know the dangers of the world. "Let me teach you a lesson." She was secretly pleased. She looked forward to the young master's shocked and panicked expression when the poison took effect. Just as she was thinking this, a strange sound suddenly came from Lu Ye's side. It was as if his throat was blocked. Then, his face flushed red and his eyes glazed over. A smile immediately appeared on the woman's beautiful face. She covered her mouth and laughed coquettishly. Although the young master's table manners weren't good, he had an otherworldly temperament. He was completely different from the bandits in the stronghold. She would be able to enjoy herself after taking him down. Bang! Lu Yi suddenly patted his chest and then grabbed the water bag beside him to drink some water. He looked at the woman with a strange expression. I choked. What's so funny? The woman's smile quickly disappeared. She lowered her head with a docile expression. Thanks to the young master's pity, I escaped from death. I'm crying tears of joy. It's not the poison taking effect? This guy is really strong. It looks like I'll have to wait a little longer. After waiting for most of the night, the woman's anticipation slowly disappeared. Then, it turned into bewilderment and panic. What's the situation with this person? She had never seen someone who could eat so much. Even the third master, who was known as a rice bucket, didn't eat as much as he did. Such a big strange beast was actually almost half-eaten. What made the woman even more puzzled was that the other party's stomach didn't show any signs of swelling. Where did the food he ate go? This guy even ate the bones. If it was just that, then it would be fine. However, she had used up all the 7 fragrance powder she carried with her, and the other party was still safe and sound. It's impossible for such an outrageous person to exist in this world. Could it be that I've encountered a ghost? This piece of meat. A voice suddenly came from the other side. The woman trembled and raised her head to look at Lu Yi. She saw Lu Yi frowning and holding a large piece of roasted beast meat in his hand. The taste isn't right. Did you change the seasoning? The woman squeezed out an ugly smile. I changed it. I ran out of the original seasoning. Although she had brought a lot of 7 fragrance powder, how could it withstand this kind of cooking? That amount of 7 fragrance powder could even poison 100 people to death. However, the other party was actually safe and sound. Thinking about how even the 6th master died in this person's hands, the woman suddenly realized that the person she met was definitely not an ordinary person. He was a cultivator on the same level as the masters. Only cultivators could resist the effects of the 7 fragrance powder. No wonder he could kill the 6th master. All right, continue roasting. Lu Yi ordered. The woman didn't dare to neglect and hurriedly complied. At the same time, in a nameless place, a mirror floated in the air. A scene was reflected in the mirror. It was a scene in the depths of a mountain forest. Under the cover of the night, a bonfire was rising. Beside the bonfire, a young man with a long saber was sitting cross-legged and eating heartily. A woman was roasting beast meat with a distressed expression. Beside her, only a small part of the skeleton of a strange beast was left. This scene was actually Lu Ye's current location, and the person eating the barbecued meat was none other than him. The perspective from the mirror's reflections seemed to be hanging not far in front of him. However, Li didn't notice it at all. Beside the mirror, several people were sitting upright. Their eyes were fixed on Lu Yi without blinking. Their eyes were filled with observation and scrutiny. A sound slowly sounded. Several people looked in the direction of the sound. They all stood up and respectfully said, "Patriarch." The sound was heard again. A moment later, a white-haired old man who looked like he was about to die walked over with a walking stick supported by a woman. A silver light flashed in the patriarch's eyes. After observing for a while, he asked, "How is the situation?" A man who had been in charge of observing the situation here said excitedly, "Patriarch, the character of this generation's successor seems to be good. At present, he is a worthy person to entrust." The patriarch nodded lightly. Strength will affect one's character, but if you want to see a person's true temperament, you will undoubtedly have to look at how he conducts himself when he is weak. Patriarch is right, but this person has only killed bandits so far. In the face of the temptation of ordinary villagers, he has turned a blind eye. This time, it should be fine. No hurry, the patriarch shook his head. Continue to observe. If there is a situation, report it at any time. Yes. Several people responded. The patriarch slowly turned around. He didn't have much time left. If he could see his clan break free from its shackles in this lifetime, he would die without regret. Originally, he thought he would never have such an opportunity in this lifetime, but who knew it would suddenly appear in front of him? Something's wrong. Someone cried out in alarm. The patriarch, who was about to leave, immediately turned around. His cloudy eyes became much clearer at this moment as he stared hard at the mirror. In the mirror, an invisible wave of qi suddenly exploded around Lu Yi. This is... The patriarch revealed a look of astonishment. His cultivation has increased. The person in charge of observing Lu Ye's situation had a clue. The moment he said this, the originally clear mirror became blurry. This is bad, the Azura field is adjusting. Didn't they already suppress his cultivation to 4 apertures? How could it have increased in such a short period of time? It seems that we all underestimated the power of that treasure. Perhaps even the Azura field can't suppress it. Now that he has broken free, the Azura field must make some adjustments. Hurry and interfere. We can't interfere. We can only make some arrangements before he enters this scene. After he enters, no one will be able to interfere. The Azura field will automatically adjust itself. There was an uproar. End of chapter. Chapter 1935. What are you panicking for? The patriarch's voice rang out. His voice was like a bell, calming the panicked clansmen down as they looked at him. There's no such thing as death in the Azura field. With Yu Yao's background, it won't be difficult for him to deal with the spirit stream battle. That's true, someone nodded. From today onwards, this old master will personally oversee this place. The patriarch, who was about to leave, changed his mind and secretly made up his mind. If this generation's successor really encountered any danger, he would risk his old life to rescue him from the training grounds. Of course, the prerequisite was that he passed the clan's test. The blurry mirror slowly returned to its original appearance. Obviously, the Azura field had been adjusted. Next to the bonfire in the mountain forest, the woman looked at Lu Yi with a puzzled expression. She had clearly sensed some strange movements from Lu Ye's side just now, but when she looked carefully, she couldn't see anything. Lowering her head to look at the broken bones on the ground, the woman felt a chill run down her spine. In just one night, a single person had actually eaten an entire strange beast clean. The masters of the house were also cultivators, but she had never heard of them having such an ability. At this moment, Lu Ye's face was filled with joy. Just now, he had opened his 5th aperture, and his strength had barely increased. Of course, the biggest benefit of opening another aperture was that his endurance had increased. Sure enough, when he first started cultivating, he had to eat more. Back then, the power of the talent tree hadn't transformed to this extent, so the effect wasn't obvious. But now, it was different. In just one night, he had opened another aperture. In a few more days, wouldn't he be able to return to the first-order spirit stream realm? So what if the world energy in this world was thin? He only needed to convert his vitality into spirit energy to rapidly increase his strength. Moreover, because he had opened his apertures before, he wouldn't encounter any bottlenecks when doing this because there was no barrier to break through. Let's go! Lu Yi stood up and called out to the female bandit, full of energy. Where are we going? The female bandit asked cautiously. Where do you think? Lu Yi mounted his horse and looked down at her. The female bandit couldn't help but shudder. She obediently went forward to rein in the stiff black horse and led the way. The village wasn't too far away, and after about half a day, a huge wooden gate appeared in front of Lu Yi. Above the village gate, there were a few bandits guarding it. Normal people were not allowed to enter. When the female bandit led Black Horse and Lu Yi to this place, they were immediately discovered by a bandit. He stood on the stone wall above the stronghold gate and looked down at them. He said, Black Spider, didn't you go with Ruan Lauer and the others to receive the 6th master? Why did you come back alone? Who is this person? So this is your stronghold. Lu Yi raised his head and looked around. He could vaguely see that there were many signs of bandits gathering in the stronghold. This is it. Black Spider's palms were full of sweat. She knew that this was the most critical moment for her. Since she had already brought the person over, she had no more value. If the other party wanted to kill her, she would not be able to resist. Well done. Lu Yi nodded and dismounted from his horse. Let them open the door. he ordered. Of course, Black Spider did not dare to disobey. He tried his best to calm his emotions and shouted up, "Open the door!" The bandit who had just spoken was now bewildered. Black Spider, what's the matter with this person? Why is he riding the sixth master's horse and holding his spear? Where did the sixth master go? Stop talking nonsense. I told you to open the door. Black Spider was extremely anxious and his tone was angry. If you don't explain clearly, I will not open the door. The bandit was not going to let it go. Boom! With a loud sound, the bandits on the stone wall suddenly lost their footing and fell down from above one after another, each of them in a daze. The bandit who had shouted felt that his head was broken. He forced himself to stand up and saw a huge hole in front of him. He blinked and took a step back. He was shocked to find that the hole was actually on the stronghold's gate. This gate was made of solid wood and was 2 feet thick. How could it be broken? In shock, he took another step back. Don't block the way. A large hand grabbed him by the neck and gently turned him, then threw him to the side. His vision twisted and he found that his companions who had fallen down with him were already dead. Their consciousness was quickly fading. Lu Ye's figure passed through the hole made by his punch and directly entered the stronghold. In front of the stronghold, the female bandit who led the way lowered her head and looked at her chest. There was a very obvious hole there. She smiled bitterly. She knew that she would not end up like this. She also guessed that the other party would kill her, but she still did not notice when the other party made his move. Thus, take revenge. The female bandit murmured and fell on her back. So what if he was a cultivator? The masters were all cultivators. This person dared to break into the stronghold. He would definitely not have a good ending. Enemy attack. With a whistle, bandits rushed out from the houses in all directions. Each of them looked fierce and fiendish. In the blink of an eye, they had completely surrounded Lu Yi. Kill him! Someone shouted. In an instant, dozens of bandits used all kinds of methods. Countless attacks came at him. Some held weapons, some threw hidden weapons, and some shot arrows from the rooftops not far away. So many! Lu Yi looked at the numbers above the bandits' heads and was full of joy. He dragged the 200-jin-long spear behind him and grabbed the end of it. Then he raised his hand high above his head. With all his strength, the thick long spear circled around him. Screams rang out one after another. In an instant, all the bandits within a radius of 5 zhang were killed. Normal people would not be able to withstand the 200-jin-long spear and the strength of his brandishing. They would be injured if they were hit, and die if they were touched. The dead bandits quickly turned into specks of light and dissipated. However, before they disappeared, rays of light flew out from their corpses and entered the Shura token at Lu Ye's waist. Rich. There were arrows and hidden weapons that hit him, but they couldn't even break his clothes. He was prepared for this kind of attack and could block it with a little spiritual power. The methods of a cultivator were not something that mortals could guess. This scene shocked everyone. Originally, the bandits did not put Lu Yi in their eyes because they had the advantage in numbers. Who would have thought that they would suffer such heavy casualties in a single exchange? A cultivator! He's a cultivator! A bandit cried out in horror. The rest of the bandits scattered in all directions. Obviously, they also knew that they could not make an enemy of a cultivator. However, how could they run? Lu Yi stood in place and stabbed out with his spear. Not far away, a large stone shattered into pieces. He flashed forward and grabbed a handful of broken stones in one hand. His other hand picked up a piece and threw it. A bandit fell to the ground. He threw it again and another one fell. How dare you come to my great wind mountain and behave so atrociously? An angry roar sounded. Several figures rushed out from the depths of the stronghold. Lu Yi turned his head and his eyes lit up. The numbers above these people's heads were obviously much higher than the average bandit. There were 4 of them. The one with the lowest number had 3,000, and the one with the highest number had 5,000, the same as the old village chief. He threw away all the broken stones in his hand. All the bandits in his field of vision had been killed. Lu Yi raised his spear and charged towards them, his face full of eagerness. Without a doubt, These were the leaders of Mount Gale. Lu Yi could sense traces of spiritual power on them, so they were most likely cultivators. This scene immediately made the leaders feel that something was wrong. Anyone who dared to charge at them was obviously not an ordinary person. Third brother, keep him busy. The leader of the group, a middle-aged man, ordered. No problem. Among them, the third leader, the fattest of them all, responded. His whole body was almost like a meatball. It was unknown how he cultivated. But even though his body was fat, his speed was not slow. As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly pulled away from the others and took the lead to attack Lu Yi. The distance between them quickly closed. The third leader's eyes almost narrowed into a line. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Spiritual power surged in his body. Facing Lu Yi's spear, he did not dodge. Instead, he clapped his hands together and accurately grabbed the spear. With his immense strength, under such suppression, the opponent's spear was no longer of any use. As long as he was entangled for a moment, the others would be able to kill him together. At that time, no matter what cultivation this person had, he would undoubtedly die. Thinking this, the third leader's face changed greatly. This was because he felt intense pain in his palms. The spear he grabbed with his hands was unparalleled. It was not at the level where he could restrain it. The third leader fiercely urged his spiritual power, but it was useless. His hands were instantly covered in blood and his palms turned into white bones. Pucci! The spear stabbed into the opponent's fat head and directly exploded. Lu Yi's figure rushed out from the rain of blood and went straight to the three behind him. The three bandit leaders were all shocked at this moment. They never expected that the third leader they had high hopes for would die like this. Seeing Lu Yi quickly approaching, the three bandit leaders did not dare to face him head-on and immediately scattered left and right. Lu Yi swept the spear in his hand and hit one of them in the waist. The huge force directly blew up half of the man's body. Without stopping, he caught up with the slowest one and grabbed him by the shoulder. "Why are you running?" This was the second leader of the stronghold. Being asked by Lu Yi, he was suddenly stunned. Of course, he was running for his life. Otherwise, what else could he run for? Seeing a fist rapidly enlarging in front of his eyes, he could not help but shout, "Big brother, save me!" With a bang, his head was smashed. Lu Yi looked up and saw that the last bandit had already run 20 feet away. He immediately raised the spear in his hand and threw it forward. "Stop!" A loud shout sounded, and another person rushed out from the depths of the stronghold. Lu Yi turned a deaf ear to him and looked forward. His spear had already pierced the figure several dozen feet away. At the last moment, the other party seemed to have urged his spirit chi to protect himself, but under the impact of such a violent force, this little bit of protection had no effect at all. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.